opportunity for us as developers to have broad, deep impact on all parts of society and all parts of economy has never been greater. AI is everywhere. A new world that is going to be made up of an intelligent cloud and an intelligent edge. It's about celebrating what you can do with that technology to have broad impact. It's about empowering every developer.
Hello. Assalamualaikum everyone. Actually, student of Architecture. Am I audible?
Yes, Hira, you are audible.
Hello.
Yes, Hira, you are audible.
Okay, Sunil, thank you so much. So starting again, Assalamualaikum everyone. I'm your host, Hira, final semester student of BS Education and part of MSP. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you, especially to our honorable guest speakers for day 3 of BootCamp. I hope you will have learned a lot from previous 2 sessions of BootCamp, but still, it's must to give a brief introduction of BootCamp who were for those who were not and who were unable to attend the previous session. So, making it short, it is Pakistan's first ever bootcamp, Azure CC, hosted by Microsoft Learn Student Ambassadors Community University of Lahore. It is basically a training program that is held for the purpose of closing the bridge between information and hands-on experience and creating skills that the employer looks for. Without wasting any more time, I would like to introduce our first guest speaker, Mr. George Artmero. He is an open source senior consultant at Microsoft and of Azure in Azure Cloud Advisory, DevOps, open source and technical pre-sales background, working for enterprises and software companies. He has over 20 years experience in the IT industry in Australia and Brazil. Mr. George is of
Hello, everyone.
also the mentor of Azure TAR. Azure TAR website is our TAR home to cloud computing science from abstraction to invention, changing the way we communicate, learn, solve problems. If you want more information about Azure TAR, you can visit azuretar.com and join training sessions. They also have their YouTube channel, Azure TAR.
Thank you a lot. Can I share my screen?
Yes, sir.
Okay, looks like a little bit, the connection there, not a little bit noise, but if you can guys mute, it probably be better for me. Thank you for the invite. I really appreciate. If you guys can hear me, let me know, and if the connection is good. Looks good. Yeah, thanks for the invitation, and I hope that everyone's enjoying the last 2 days, learning about cloud computing, learning about Azure. And I'm Jorge Arteiro from Melbourne. I work for Microsoft as open source consultant, as was said, and I have been doing that, working technology for the last 20 years. I'm very lucky to be working for Microsoft today. And datazureta.com is my community site and community blog. I'm happy to onboard anyone that want to collaborate and share content. I'm here to talk about, Azure Kubernetes service. There is a big movement happening in the last 4 or 5 years about containers, Docker containers, containers orchestrators like Kubernetes. And that's became like one of the biggest service on Microsoft Cloud on Azure. It's called Azure Kubernetes Service. And just pass here. That's who I am. I'm a open source consultant, DevOps, and have been, lucky to get in projects on infra code automation using things like ARM templates, Terraform, using CI/CD pipelines, and many different tools that people these days. DevOps become like a job, become like a position. A few years ago, we just used to call developers and infra sysadmins. We now have this guy called DevOps. Is someone that's between the infrastructure and the development teams and doing a lot of automation. And that's what I do for Microsoft, and I have doing many different projects for enterprise companies. But my background is Microsoft MVP. If someone wanna become this Microsoft most valuable professional, I really recommend. You just have to be collaborating, doing things for the community without making any money, and have this passion to sharing content. And I was lucky to be Microsoft MVP for almost 3 years before I joined Microsoft. And I've done a lot of talks about, API management, about containers. And I have this Linux background since like 2000, and that's matched very well with the containers movement that we have now. Talking about the community, why I like to put a slide in to talk about my community work, because without the students, without the community, we are nobody. The Azureta YouTube channel that I created is not just for me, it's for the community. We have a few guest speakers and mentors like Fernando Volnik, Nuno Cossé, that's MVP. We have Mateus from Brazil, and we publish things in English and Portuguese, and I'm happy to publish any other language. And please follow us. If you can go on YouTube now and subscribe, and keep following. We have almost more than 200 subscribers, and it's growing. We're doing that for the last 3 months only, and have 50 videos published. And I want more collaboration. I want to make sure that everyone can learn Azure. And if anyone has content and want to record anything, let me know. We're happy to record your content as well and publish on Azureta. There are blogs. If you don't want to record, you want to write blogs, azureta.com is a place to. I'm very, very happy to publish any blog any content that you guys are creating. But we're here to talk about, about containers, because there is no Azure Kubernetes service without containers. And containers became something with Docker. Containers is nothing more than a Linux kernel feature that, LXC was a Linux. There are, C groups on the Linux kernel. There's a few features on the Linux kernel that allows to isolate your execution, your process, and that could be your application. It's a single process isolated inside your machine, inside like a virtual machine or a physical machine, and that's running on top of the kernel. On Linux, that is that diagram that I'm showing here. You have the the Linux kernel, and Docker was the first one that created like an engine using those kernel Linux kernel features to isolate a process. And then Docker was a company, was even called another name, that used to publish websites and publish, websites for companies. And they started doing automation and automating this process. And the automation of this process become Docker. Become like a command line tool that you could say Docker run a specific tarball. In Linux, tarball is like a zip file where your, application image was running. It was pretty much like a Linux distribution running. And Docker created this Docker run that could run this tarball and could isolate like networking, storage, all using Linux namespace and some other features. And after, I think, a couple of years, Docker started to create a separate library called Containerd. And that library was open source. And now, today, pretty much Containerd is the software layer that manages containers on Linux and Windows. Windows came to the game as well. I'm going to show here. Then container is not just a Linux thing; it's a Linux and Windows feature. And then once Docker open source that Containerd, that's part of the Cloud Native Compute Foundation called CNCF. Maybe someone have talked last 2 days about CNCF. But all the open source projects related with cloud native, very close to containers, are part of the Cloud Compute Foundation now, Cloud Native Compute Foundation. That's part of the Linux Foundation. Then I think 2 weeks ago we had the KubeCon. KubeCon was the biggest conference from Linux Foundation about cloud native solutions, and Containerd is part of that. And Containerd is like a high-level library. The container runtime is called runC. It's also from Docker and was open source. And then we can say that Docker was the main, contributor to open source and to have everything on open source for containers today. And then, like Azure Kubernetes Service is going to be now only calling Containerd directly, and then call runC to create your, containers isolated by namespace. That's how it works. Microsoft also decided to create on Windows what we call Linux containers on Windows. Okay, to be able to run Linux containers on the Windows operating system, we create that utility VM. That's a very lightweight virtualization because you cannot run, Linux process on Windows. Then we need a very lightweight, virtual machine that that we can run. We don't even need like full Hyper-V anymore. We have a library on Windows now called, virtual platform that just to run those things. And that's, where Windows Subsystem for Linux was born. And that they pretty much using the same technology to do Windows Subsystem for Linux, that Linux running on Windows. You can have any distro like Ubuntu. And the way that works is, Windows kernel using these, host container service to talk with the guest container service. That's like a utility VM. And then you do like runC, that's the container runtime, and then you create the container. Okay, the same way that we saw before. But now you can have Linux containers running on Windows. And you can have now, since 2016, when it was created, you can have Windows containers. That's a different flavor. Then you have Windows kernel and Windows, Microsoft will work I think, couple of years just to create the features that you need on the Windows kernel to allow containers to have the same features that we have on Linux. And now we can say that you can have Linux containers on Linux, machines. You can have Windows containers on Windows machine, and you can have also Linux containers on Windows using this new feature that they created. Okay, they have three flavors there. On Windows, we have what we call Hyper-V containers, and we have normal Windows containers that like similar to Linux containers, just process isolation. And Hyper-V containers is very similar to Linux containers on Windows. They have this utility VM here. There is a virtual machine that's very lightweight that can do similar things like Linux containers on Windows. Why we created that? Because it's kind of a sandbox, bring an extra level of isolation, more than the normal kernel isolation. And if you have time, you spend some time researching about containerd to understand how container runs on Linux and on Windows. It's all based on this library that's part of the Cloud Native Compute Foundation. It's open source. You can see the whole code. You can even run on your machine, on your local machine, if you want to learn how to do that, manually. And how that works. Containerd was, a bunch of libraries, and that's the main one. They use gRPC for communication, for faster communication. It's like a protocol, using HTTP2 to talk with containerd. And all these services, including Microsoft Azure, including AKS, we, talk with containerd now natively. Kubernetes has one interface called CRI runtime, and containerd has a API just to talk with Kubernetes kubelet. That's the main component from Kubernetes. We're going to talk about this. And all the core services now are open source. You can see we manage container image, we manage snapshots, namespace, all the storage, and is all managed by containerd. And you can see the container runtimes, runC. That's the Microsoft host container service to run containers on Windows. And I have a new, similar to Hyper-V containers, they call Kata containers or Firecracker, gvisor. But it's a good thing if you want to spend some time and learn these. I recommend to understand how that works. But we're not going details here because it'll be too much for that presentation. Going straight to AKS, to Azure Kubernetes Service, how that works, okay? Azure Kubernetes Service is what we call, sorry, there's some message here. Anyone want to ask something? I'm just following the questions here, but it's all good. Can I keep going?
Yes, sir. All good.
Okay, that's great. Let's start here. Yeah, starting Azure Container Service, how that works. Okay, a cluster is something more, maybe I can go for the next slide to explain better. Is something like that. A cluster of anything is a group of machines. Okay, what we call agent pools. We get Linux VMs or physical machines or Windows VMs. Each yellow box here will be like the orange box is a virtual machine, and we create a cluster. Okay, 1, 2, 5, 8 machines, as many as you want. I think you can have 200 now on Azure or more. And we create this group of machines, okay, and of pools. And now, how Kubernetes work is we starting deploying things on these nodes. See, these nodes is the orange box. Okay, Kubernetes has what we call the master, or let's say we don't want to call master anymore, but the engine of Kubernetes that manage the whole cluster. The cluster could be like here on this example, like 2 nodes, or could be 5, 8. And how that works, we talk with this API server. We could say that the Kubernetes cluster is nothing more than like an API that we can talk. Okay, we can talk with a REST API. Then we call that the API, and we ask it to deploy some application, passing like a metadata that's normally using like a YAML file. It's like a configuration file where we tell this API server, can you deploy that for us? I don't care where you're going to deploy inside that cluster. If we have 20 nodes, find a node with CPU and memory available and deploy my application using a container. Okay, talk with containerd and do the whole thing. How that works? The API server is going to schedule that to run. It's going to store that in a database called etcd. That's a key value database. Okay, there's a lot of things happening here, but to simplify, they schedule that to run. That scheduler talk with the nodes, and each node runs one process called kubelet, and that's what talks with the scheduler and tell the scheduler, look, I have CPU and memory available on my node that can run your application. Then that application is going to deploy it on that node, and kubelet is going to call containerd. Okay, that's going to call the container runtime and create the container. And all the the routing, all the the proxy is done by kubeproxy, another component here. Kubeproxy is listening what kubelet is deploying and just making all the configuration to make sure that that application can talk with the whole cluster, can talk with the external world, like a public IP. And that's how Kubernetes works. Okay, nothing more than an API server and a scheduler. And if that application that's running here on that container fails, okay, Kubernetes is always watching all the applications running. If application fails, that's going back to that scheduler, and that scheduler is going to find another node or even the same node to restart the application. You don't have even to care. You're just going to tell Kubernetes, I want to like 5 instances of my, front-end JavaScript application to be running, all the time. And they're going to find nodes where those applications can be running. And one nice thing here is that if the whole node fails, okay, they're going to get everything that's run on that node and move to another node. Okay, it looks like magic, but if you think 5-10 years ago, it was a nightmare to do something like that. It wasn't easy. Okay, now it's very easy. You guys may be from the generation that's going to say, oh, I can scale my application to 100, 1,000 instances in seconds. Okay, that's possible now, but wasn't easy even like 3-4 years ago. And how that integrates with Microsoft Azure. You guys have some session last 2 days, and you see that Microsoft has, what you call Azure Virtual Network. Is a soft-defined network where you can deploy this cluster. You can go for these, like all those VMs that has to be deployed, and those VMs will be deployed on that virtual network. Okay, we're going to look here one VM. Like we saw, the VM is running kubelet, container runtime, and your containers. And you can attach, the Azure service like Azure Files, Azure Disk to your containers. If you want to have like a stateful application where you're going to, keep state, you can have like use Azure Files to attach those storage on your containers as well. And like I said before, kubeproxy does all, the routing for us. And kubeproxy integrates with, Azure using that, what they call, Azure CNI network interface. That's like a common interface to integrate with Kubernetes. And Microsoft wrote what we call Azure CNI, Container Network Interface, where when you deploy something here and you ask for a public IP or even a private IP from your virtual network, that kubeproxy is going to be doing all that, routing here for you. That's how Kubernetes works. You're going to see that running, but Kubernetes also, it's not just for Linux. Like I said, Azure Kubernetes Service you can use for Windows, and you can have this. You can create what you call pools and then you can create Linux and Windows different pools. And depending of if your application is just for Windows, you deploy on a Windows pool, and vice versa. And you can also integrate with the Azure Container Instance. That's like a serverless container that offer from Microsoft. I'm not going to talk about this, but you can integrate AKS with that if you want to run, serverless. Another thing, if you guys saw Azure Functions last 2 days, you can also run Azure Functions using like an open source project from Microsoft called KEDA, KEDA. It's an open source project where you can run Azure Functions on your AKS cluster. Okay, and it's pretty much using like running like the Azure Functions on web service environment or web service. You can run on AKS as well. But the nice thing is on AKS, on Azure, is that you don't have to manage the master, the control plane of Kubernetes. It's all fully managed by Microsoft. You don't have to pay anything if you don't want. If you want some SLA, you can pay a small monthly fee for that. But the only thing that you care is about your application. Okay, even those machines are most managed by Microsoft. There is not much things that you can do on those VMs, but the master is still fully managed for Microsoft. And on Windows, and Linux as well, how that works. Like I said, when you deploy, Microsoft creates an Azure load balancer. And if you want to have a public IP pointing to this load balancer, let's say I have domain, Azureta, let's say azureta.com. I want to point for that cluster. I can point my DNS to a public IP, and that the public IP will be on that load balancer, and then I receive all the traffic. And if my application has to move from one node to another, Kubernetes is going to change all this thing. We don't have to care. All these kube proxy is done, automatically, and then we don't have to care where our application is running. We have just to deploy like a YAML file, and everything works. And that is fully managed. The master here on the left side is fully managed. You don't have access. You cannot SSH the server to do anything, and you don't have to. Okay. That's a normal. If you want to know how Kubernetes work, how AKS and Azure works, you must be wondering. Okay, I have my source code. How can I deploy application there? Your source code normally is on Git, like GitHub, okay, or Azure DevOps. And you're going to get your source code. We normally do a Docker build, to build what we call a container image. Okay, a container image, nothing more than packaging all your dependencies, like Linux or your packages in your application. Once you pack that, you create this container image that you have to store somewhere. And you now can have GitHub registry where you can store your container image, or you can have Azure Container Registry. That's a private Docker registry where you can save your image and just tell for Kubernetes, I want to run that image using, like a command line or some, package management called Helm to say, can you deploy that to my cluster? And then that's going to be deployed. Okay, on the build processes, all these things, how the image layers works, you can just stack layers of files. That's pretty much your Docker image. Okay, those things can be fully automated on pipelines. Docker build, you depend on Docker itself, but you now have one thing called build kit, where is open source, then you don't really need Docker anymore, as using containerd, and then there is no dependence from Docker anymore. We're just still calling Docker containers, but we don't have a fully dependence on Docker anymore, just on the open source. I recommend you guys to install those tools if you want to work with AKS, Windows Terminal, Windows Subsystem for Linux. Look on Cloud Shell. That's pretty much a terminal to work with Azure. and Visual Studio Code, and Helm itself. If you want to do local, I have a talk that I maybe have to publish, but you guys can Google. I did 3 or 4 weeks ago about local Kubernetes, and you can find azure.com as well. Some talks about how to set up your local Kubernetes. I can even show here quickly on my demo. But let's go for some hands-on quickly here. Then I open for questions after that, okay? If you have questions, please start sending your questions, and we're going through the questions very soon. First thing I want to show here is my Windows terminal. You probably have seen that before. If you don't, just install. Let me get my browser as well. And I want to get my browser here. I have a cluster that I just created, okay, a few minutes ago. And how that works. There are videos on Zoreta explain how to create a cluster, but if you go here, new AKS Kubernetes service, you can create a new cluster, and you can see everything that we discussed. You can create a cluster here. Okay, let's say AKS demo 2, and you can select the region. You can get the versions that you want. We normally now going to support 12 months from the date of the version was published. You can select how many VMs you want. Like say I can have 100 VMs if I want on my cluster. I can have just like 3. I can select the size of my nodes, how much CPU and memory. Because at the end of the day, the cluster is like a bunch of VMs, CPU and memory, and Kubernetes look as the whole cluster as a big VM, as a big machine. Okay, we combine all those VMs in one, and you say, okay, now I have 15 cores and 20 gig of memory, and I can use that. And like I said, you can create pools. You can create Windows pools as well if you want, and select size. I'm not going to create here. I'm just going to show here, but I have a cluster created already. Then look, it's a step-by-step. You can just create, you can select how you're going to do authentication, role-based access control, everything that the Kubernetes clusters has, we have here available. We have very, integration with like encryption, managed identity on Azure. With Azure Network, we can have fully advanced network. You can manage network policies with, some components. You can integrate with your container registry, okay, and you can integrate with Azure monitoring. But if you haven't seen all the, monitoring for Azure is done by Log Analytics and Azure monitoring. Then once you do that, you create your cluster, okay? Once the cluster is created, we're going back here, and you can see you have my cluster created. A cluster itself, let's create here. They create like 2 resource groups. One called like AKS demo, another is called, AKS demo, a second resource group, where the public IP is, where the virtual machines are, and where the load balance that Microsoft creates, to get your traffic to the cluster here. On the first resource group, you have the cluster itself and the virtual network. If you go inside the cluster that was created, nice, I can see some questions come. I'm going to answer along the way. It's a good one. How is Kubernetes related to Docker? Yeah, Docker was just, like I said, was create the container, movement and create the container D. And Kubernetes is an orchestrator for container. Okay, one thing is running one container, one thing is running 15, 20 containers, but for the same application. And make sure that all those containers are always running. All that orchestration is done by Kubernetes. Okay. But looking for the cluster, you can see that now here on the Azure portal, you can see what's running on the cluster. You can see Kubernetes namespace. You can see all the workloads running on this cluster. Okay, those are the normal namespace here. You can see you can filter by namespace. If you go by default, those are just the applications that I deploy on my cluster. I just deploy here to show you, like a few minutes ago, like a voting applications that you can find here. Okay, you can find on the Azure portal how to deploy this voting application. Why I'm showing that simple application? Because you can follow the Azure documentation and try to do the same. It's a very way to get started. That's the first thing you have to understand. How to create your cluster. See, you can create by command line or using the portal. See, use your portal host line, and you can run one application to test your cluster. Okay, test your application. And that's what you're doing. We deploy the cluster from the portal. Here, you can see that my cluster is running, and you can see all the pods. Okay, a pod is a group of containers. Can be one container like this one, or can be more than one container. Okay, that's a pod is one thing that was created by Kubernetes. And Kubernetes created all these ideas of deployments. Is a unit of deployment. I want to deploy this on my cluster. I create a deployment. And one deployment create what we call a controller. That's a replica set. And that's the replica set that manages how many instances of each service are running. You can see here from my core DNS, because I have a DNS inside the cluster. I have 2 instances of that running, okay? And I can scale that. You're going to see how I can scale this thing. And that's one of the things that's created by the deployment. And if you want to do like stateful applications, you can use daemon set, like a Redis, a cluster or Redis cache you're running on your cluster, that you can use daemon set. You can create like background jobs, cron jobs that run just once or run every few minutes or every day. Those are main things from Kubernetes, and now you can see that on Azure portal as well. And one of the main things to get all the traffic going to your cluster from the external world is one thing called service or ingress. Okay, service. When you deploy something and you ask for service, and you ask for a service of type load balancer here, like I did, they give a public IP. Okay, they talk with Microsoft Azure. We're going to provision like a public IP, and you're going to assign this public IP to your application, okay, to your service, to your Kubernetes service for this application. And if you click on that IP, you can see that I have my application running there. If you guys go on that IP 2053.106.135, 2053.106.135, you can see that you can just play with that application that's running now. Guys, start clicking there. You can see maybe some, if the application is running correctly. And then, and that's how your cluster works. You can see all the nodes that was created, okay? And you can scale your cluster. That's pretty much how, Kubernetes itself works. The deployment that I did here is just like, open my Visual Studio Code. That's how Kubernetes deploy files to your cluster. Increase the font. You can see that when you say that we have metadata, a configuration file. That's a YAML file. That's how it works. That's a YAML file. We have a deployment. We call in this API on Kubernetes, and we're asking to run this container. Okay, there's a container image here. Open those ports. I'm asking for that CPU and memory. Okay, for that application to run. I'm creating an internal service here for that backend. Then I deploy the backend, and I'm also deploying the front end. It's a second deployment. There's a separation. Each time that you have that separation, you're deploying a separate resource on Kubernetes. And you also deploy the front end with the same resource limits. Okay. And in this case, you want to expose the front end as a load balancer on port 80. And that's what I did. If you come here and you deploy that, it's pretty much that command that I did here. I'm going to do the number 2 here just to show. Once you do that, Kubernetes just called the API and created that. If you go back to the cluster and go for workloads, you can see that back to is the front end is already running. The back end will be up very soon. Yep, it's all running in seconds. If you go in service, you can see that now I have like front end 2, have a different IP, and now I have the same application running, but in a different IP. Then you can deploy multiple applications this way, okay? And you can deploy in seconds, okay? In seconds. If I go back now on my configuration file and I say I don't want just one instance of my front end, I want like 10 or maybe 5, okay? Because I don't have too much space. What I have to do, I have to go here and reapply my configuration. Sorry, I have to do number 1. And you can see that I have this change. The front end was changed. That's the only thing was changed. Then I go back here on my workload. You can see that the front end now is scaling. You can see that I have 4 running now, and soon will be 5 running if I have space on my cluster. But I have 4 available and 5, I want a 5, I have 4 running. Maybe I don't have too much space available anymore. But I have 4 available now. If I go my application, now that's running in multiple, instances, not just one. And that's how you scale, simple like that. Okay, and that's not failing. They just say that they don't have more space to run. Once we remove something or scale the cluster, we could run more. There's our option that you can scale if you want. But that's the basics of Kubernetes. I'm going for the questions to make sure that you guys got the idea. That's how you talk with your cluster. You talk from a command line called kubectl get nodes, and that's my cluster. So if I say kubectl get, I can also do everything from command line. I can see all my application running. Okay. Let's see here the questions that we have. We have, can you explain the different components of Kubernetes architectures? Yep, we saw that here. We pretty much saw that. That's the Kubernetes architecture. We have the API server, the etcd, that's a storage, the scheduler, and on each node have the kubelet. And that's pretty much is like a API that get your request and talk with each node and synchronize the application and make sure that everything's running. Okay, and on the network, any Azure integrations like that, integrate with storage, with networking. Question 3, should Kubernetes proxy services needed for this? Kubernetes proxy services needed for this. Not sure what that means, but kubeproxy is required, to do all the IP tables on your Linux, for example. And every time that you expose like a service, like we did here before, there is, a port that's mapped in using like IP tables on Linux to do that proxy thing. Explain again node port, please. Okay, node port, that's stuck like that. You can expose a service as node port. When you do that, you just open like a node port on all the virtual machines of the cluster. And then if you don't have a public IP, you can just send all the traffic to that node port, and that works. That's the normal way that's used by anyway when you. But on Azure, you can do load balancer, you can do private IPs of your VNet as well. Okay, maybe if you understand, but it's pretty much like that. A service expose hours like a node port. Yeah, what's the key command? Is a good question. It's just an alias. I just create an alias because I don't want to type kubectl all the time. And kubectl is the command line for Kubernetes. If you just type ctl, you can see all the commands that you can do. That you can see everything on my cluster. Okay, you pretty much can talk with your cluster using command line. And kubectl, okay, just an alias for that. Last question is, if a node is tainted, is there a way to still schedule the pods to the nodes? If you taint a node, it's pretty much you're telling Kubernetes to not schedule anything on that node. Okay, then you have to untaint the node to make sure that that works. But you can do that if you want to do upgrade. You can taint the node, and drain the node, and all the resources from that node will be moved to another node. Then you can safely upgrade that node or do things. Any more questions? I think we are close to the time agreed, but I really hope that you guys follow eyes on and subscribe the Azure channel and collaborate with the channel, and that's pretty much what I have. But let me just share my last screen. If you want to copy the links, there are some links here. You can get a documentation and some local Kubernetes that you can have. Thank you. If you don't have more questions, I think we are. Yep. The Azure yeah, the Azure link is youtube.com Azure. That's the YouTube channel. Azure.com is our blog, and Twitter Azure at Azure. And we have 50 videos. We have videos in English and Portuguese. And if you want to record with us, let me know. Just ping us, and that's it. That's pretty much the community. And if you can just ping and subscribe the channel and help grow that community. And that's my first time talking here and talking for on Pakistan, but I have worked with many people from your country, and I hope that will be the first of many. Very happy to talk next event. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, George, for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the invite. Thank you, and thank you everyone that organized this event. That sounds like amazing. so much, many good content. Thank you so much.
Okay. Now I would like to introduce our second guest speaker, Mr. Hamid Siddiqpur Saleh. He is Microsoft MVP in Cloud and Data Center Management and Microsoft Certified Trainer. Microsoft Azure Architect and System Administrator with an engineer's degree in Information Technology with more than 6 years experience in Windows Server and Cloud Infrastructure Administration. Solid knowledge and work experience in TCP, IP, routing protocols, LAN, LAN, and WAN with Cisco routers, switches, UVM, firewalls, and load balancers, including configuration, maintenance, and traffic monitoring. So, please, Mr. Hamid Siddiqpur Saleh, come and join us. Hello.
Hello. I think there's a little noise that.
I'm so sorry. I think it's on my side. I'm gonna mute my mic.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for your time and joining the bootcamp event from Microsoft student ambassadors and University of Lahore. And thank you for them for hosting this beautiful bootcamp and making the preparation for everything. I would like to start with turning on my camera first, and then I hope you already see my screen. Okay. First of all, today and tomorrow, I'm honored to be here to have two presentations. The first presentation we're gonna have is about Azure Cloud in general, and the tomorrow one is about Azure Migration Service. So today we'll be reviewing in general what is exactly public cloud, private cloud, and the cloud itself, and where it originated from, and where are we right now, which ways we passed through in the history to become here, and what does Azure doing right now for us with the all services in public and services we are currently using. So as the host introduced me, my name is Hamid Siddiqpur Saleh. I'm currently Microsoft Solutions consultant in All for One Group, and I'm doing this presentation on behalf of the company, also a cloud service provider, and also the community. A quick brief of my story here, as the host also already introduced. Currently, I'm working as Azure Architect and System Administrator, also holding MVP since 2019 December, and also MCT nearly for 4 years in Exchange Server, Azure, Office 365, and Windows Server technologies and services. It's nearly 7 years that I've been in this industry. Last 4 years, it's more I'm on cloud services, especially with Microsoft services and Azure itself, and with even the little experiences that we've got, or me itself, I'm glad that we are having the opportunity to share them here. Here's my blog address and the LinkedIn address if, for connection. Despite that we have a limited time, I don't want to waste some time on the page, and we will quickly move to the main topics with what we are going to go through. So this is our agenda today. First, we are gonna have a look on cloud computing. So what exactly cloud computing does for us right now, and which services does it provide to us, and what we can host there, and what is the benefit that it gives to us, why we should move to cloud, and we're gonna answer to all these why questions. And also for all my colleagues and all those who's in IT industry that also dealing with these questions and whys, and which services that we're going to use, that we're going to also solve them today to answer which way should we follow, and which we need to insist on in order to, decrease our costs and improve the performance and productivity. The second discussion will be about private and public cloud differences. The third one will be the differences between IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. The fourth one will be totally about Microsoft Azure itself. And the fifth one will be about Azure cost optimization and how Azure, actually the service which Azure itself hosts inside itself is also called Azure cost optimization. However, we're gonna also evaluate and to see how Azure actually helps us to deduct our costs and improve our efficiency. So first, we're gonna start with cloud computing, and let's check where cloud computing came from which systems, and through which ways we went through, and now we are, and where are we right now? As you know, all the computing systems all started in 3 levels, with desktop PCs, laptops, all the small PCs, with the topologies that we had before, connecting all these systems together in order to make a simple network and trying to share something with each other, trying to share a printer, trying to share a scanner or any device inside an autonomous system. By the days pass, all these technologies just grow, and now we're maybe in the middle of the second era, but we're now totally mixed with the cloud computing and internet era. The internet era came with the ideas of connecting these whole systems, servers, client systems, together over an internet connection, over a centralized point with the services such IP addresses, DNS services, and making it easier to make the whole world to communicate with each other. So what we are right now today is the cloud computing era, and with on-demand and hybrid flexibility, as I wrote in the presentation, it helps also to you to not to totally move to cloud services such as Azure or Google Cloud or Amazon, and there are lots of now public cloud companies which gives you the similar services with differences in prices, performance, the efficiency, and the most important one for a user, for the customer which wants to use those services, is the performance of the service and the flexibility of the service. And the questions first, when it comes to in mind of an administrator, a system administrator, a cloud administrator, doesn't matter. The question is, will it help me also to keep something for me in my infrastructure? For me, as I know, the clouds or the on-prem services that I'm working with, that most of people also trying to keep something in their on-prem, not to totally 100% move to public cloud. So this is also one of important things. Will it provide me a very secure way to keep my on-prem synchronized with the public services that I'm going to host in that public cloud or not? As it mentions here, this word cloud computing is a demand for provision of computational resources, your data and your software from a computer network rather a local computer. For instance, if you're hosting a service on your on-prem and you publishing those services to a public cloud in order to make it reachable from all over the world and also decreasing all your costs and expenses in the future. So you're not doing it all from a local computer, rather you're from a computer network. I also forgot to mention in the first step that we will have, despite that we will have time for questioning and answering, but you can already write your questions here and I will try to check and answer by them, either from live video or in the chat itself. So the most important topics that first, when we push the first step in cloud industry, is that we are going to totally be aware of the differences between these two. So firstly, what exactly is private and public cloud? Firstly, let's go back to the previous slide about the era of getting completed all these cloud services. The first, it started with private infrastructure. Let's call it private cloud. That you were the responsible for whole infrastructure. You were keeping all your data center alive, all your servers, preparing your hardware. If there were a failure, you were the responsible to change the hardware and update your hardwares or keep them and maintain the electricity in your data center, and everything from 0 to 100 that you needed to have efficient human resources in that data center in order to keep that alive for you, keep your services up for you with the lowest downtime as much as you can. But by the time passed, now as we mentioned, we have public cloud services like Azure, Google Cloud, and other companies as well. These companies provide us public cloud services that you pay and you use what you are going to use, and you are not even responsible for anything else, just but the service that you pay in the public cloud. So in a result, what exactly will be efficient for us? Yes, logically, when we are thinking that totally moving to cloud and moving whole our infrastructure to cloud will help us to gain more performance, reduce downtime, and mostly reducing costs in a long-term permit. We will discuss about cost decreasing and TCO options in our next meeting tomorrow about Azure migration service. But here I'm just going through as a summary about that service that when you're planning to move, that your main goal is, and the first question that you're asking to the public cloud service provider is how much I'm going to save in next 5 years, in next 10 years. How will it help me, and how's the security? How you will keep my data safe? So public cloud providers like Azure assure you that you will have nearly 100% uptime, like 99.999999. It's nearly 100%, and you are sure that your data is also safe. Sorry. So this is also public cloud. You rent what you are going to use, and you pay also for what you are going to use in that public cloud. Also, there is now an option, and most of administrators using right now, as we discussed earlier, mixture of both services. That means you already own 10 data centers with lots of hundred thousands of servers, databases, virtual machines, and you decided to move nearly 80% of your infrastructure to cloud in order to reduce really in cost, in expenses, and use them all in cloud. So you decide to let's keep some of my data and the servers that you are really keen about them, and to keep them for me in local. But you are again giving access to that cloud, public cloud provider, and the services, the same service that you are using in the cloud. For example, let's say Active Directory. You can have a local Active Directory in your data center and Azure Active Directory in the cloud. When you synchronize them, it's a good example of hybrid cloud or Exchange server. You are using local Exchange server in your on-prem data center, and you are also getting a public one from Microsoft O365 Exchange Online, and you are keeping them synchronized all the day. So that means you are maybe having more than 100% uptime, because you are sure that you are having uptime in cloud, and your mails are working and routing from there, and also you have them in on-prem. So that's a good option for some critical, vital services that you are using in your organization. Make them hybrid, so it will help you a lot in order to keep the redundancy and escape from single point of failure. Our next slide is about differences between cloud models. Let's call them cloud models, or how you're going to use cloud, in which manner. These are just a definition of some services that you can use and rent and pay for that in cloud. So let's start with infrastructure as a service. In the next slide, it will be more in detail, but let's have a general look at it right now to explore what exactly mean these three services. So infrastructure as a service, or in abbreviation, it's called IaaS. That is a cloud computing solution, consists provisioning and managing computing resources from the internet. Like you are renting, you are buying the servers, you are paying for the resource that you are buying, and you are going to administrate most of the services. I mean, most of the infrastructure that you're gonna pay in infrastructure as a service. And like in Azure, you're buying a virtual machine, and you're responsible for that virtual machine and the services inside it, and the crashes and all the events and the logs inside that. So this is what an infrastructure as a service example called. The second option called PaaS, or platform as a service. Complete development and deployment environment in the cloud, and the resources that you get, and it delivers some services to you and your customers and your client over the internet. A good example of that we can say IIS. For example, you're getting a web server and you're just paying for it. We can see here some examples of that, like Google App Engine or Apache Stratos or OpenShift. These are all examples of PaaS, Platform as a Service, for software developers especially. And let's move to what is SaaS, or Software as a Service. This is a cloud applications totally prepared and ready to use by the end user, by the client. And it presents you with the most prepared and finalized option of the service. And you are not responsible for anything for the service. You are just using this service, like all 365 of Microsoft. The services you have there is a good example of software as a service. Microsoft has already prepared those services for you. Microsoft is responsible for everything behind Office 365. You are just opening your administrative dashboard. You are going to Exchange Online. You're creating a mailbox, or other examples like Dropbox or Cisco WebEx or Zoom. Oh, these are all examples of software as a service. You are just connecting and you're using. You're not responsible for anything behind those services. So let's get a bit more into detail of these three cloud models. Let's start with all customer managed enterprise IT, like a legacy IT, like legacy data centers, or right now we are also having data centers which is already customer managed, and just the customer or the administrator itself is responsible for those services in their data center and keeping those services alive also. And here, as I mentioned, that because you're the most responsible person for these services, this is very crucial. I mean, you need having a good team for monitoring. You need to have a team for taking care of your data center and keeping them alive, and not to encounter any downtime for those services you are having. Let's move to IaaS, Infrastructure as a Service. So here we can see a good example of what customer is responsible and what the cloud provider is responsible for. So if you're buying a service which is inside the pool of infrastructure as a service, you are responsible for the applications inside, security, databases, and operating systems, which you are paying as you go, and the paying for what are you using in the cloud from that cloud provider. And the cloud provider itself is responsible for keeping them alive and secure 24 hours, 7 days a week, for virtualization, for cloud provider is responsible for the hypervisors behind them, the servers, the storage of those servers, the networking, making them not to have, if any link has got down, other links also will not work. I mean, this is all the responsibility of cloud provider and the whole data centers. And in these green colors, customers are not responsible for, and you are just keeping these services alive and working on what you are going to provide over the internet. Let's come to platform as a service, which we previously talked about in the previous slide. This is what we call that a good idea for software developers, or maybe you're going to host a web application or a web server. So here that you are just responsible for the application inside that pool, inside that cloud model that you're going to rent and have in the public cloud. The other options here, such as security, databases, operating system, virtualization, servers, storage, networking, and data center. Again, cloud provider is responsible for all of them 24 hours, 7 days a week. And if there's any problem that's going to happen with those services, you are again have access. For example, in Microsoft, you are having a good ticketing system and helping system immediately when you open a ticket. If you encounter with any problem, for example, with storage, and when you realize that's a storage problem, you can contact with Microsoft support, and for sure you will get an immediate response. But here, what you're getting support is about your applications which you're using from that public cloud provider, such as Azure. As we check also services like O365 and the other applications as well, here you can see customer is not responsible for any services. So in software as a service, cloud provider itself keeping all the services and the applications, databases, everything that we can see, every option that we can see here, keeping them alive and providing a service which is configured over these infrastructure, over these databases, applications, storage, servers, virtualization, like O365, which using all these options here in order to provide you a service that you're opening in your web browser and you're just using without having any responsibility in the background of those services, like we reviewed earlier. I will check for questions if we have any. Okay. Yes, Mohammed, differences between cloud and mobile computing. Okay, for instance, if you're having such services in cloud, for instance, just imagine a service that you're providing to your customers, and your clients need to use those services in order to, when your clients goes to outsource support to provide some keeping them alive services or providing some services to your customers, for sure that you can integrate those cloud and mobile computing in especially one of the main purposes that why you're moving to cloud, especially in a cloud from Microsoft, and you're paying for the service that you expect to use it also for mobile services that you're having in your infrastructure currently. For instance, maybe you're having some problems with connectivity with your mobile devices outside of your office, or your external employees or external customers need to access some services in your local on-prem infrastructure. So this is a good idea if you're going to use a mobile service or a mobile computing service to keep them in cloud in order to have more efficiency. the other question. Okay, Muhammad, second question. As far as I'm concerned, for large scale cloud computings, I mean, for me, I will choose infrastructure as a service with having a hybrid option, because I'm going to use a service in a large scale with large incoming of requests for me. So that's the option I will choose. So for your third question, API, application programming interface referred to. If you're having a service that you're going to give some part of this, I mean, you have a service and you want to give some information of this service to a local service that you are using, or another public cloud, or in the same public cloud provider, you're having several services. You want to connect them with some ways in order to get some information from this from themselves. Sorry. So why it is used? In order to keep them synchronized, or keep them to ease of access, get some information. So it depends on the user, or on the administrators, what administrator itself, what kind of information does the administrator need to pulls from that service. Sorry. So yes, and hello. I hope that it's solved.
Yeah.
There was some.
Yes, it's okay.
Yeah, there was a disconnection. I think encountered. Okay. Okay, sorry for the inconvenience. It happened earlier about disconnecting. It wasn't also internet problem, I think.
Yes, sir. Yeah, this is okay. Now it's okay.
Yeah, it seems it's okay now. Okay, thank you.
Welcome, sir.
Okay, we are continuing with the most important slide now we are having. So let's have a quick review from as we had previously. We went through infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, and the differences between them, and some examples of which one is used in infrastructure as a service, which one for PaaS, and which one for SaaS. So we are now coming to the most um, effective and most popular public cloud providers, and that we are using currently in our daily basis as an administrator in that industry, and we are dealing with the services in there and how to make it more efficient, how to make it to get more performance from the services that is hosted on Azure, how to monitor those services that we are having in there, how to use CLI and shell scripting in order to make it automated, how to use Azure DevOps services to make it infrastructure as a code, that the whole world also goes to that side. Even the network side or the system side, everything comes in a centralized point called infrastructure as a code that makes it automated for your whole infrastructure. So it is also needed for your virtual machines and applications, databases. So as much as you make it automated, as much as you get lower user request, downtime, and dealing with services from graphical GUI interface. So Microsoft Azure is an example of public cloud providers, which known as Azure also. From Microsoft, that is provided for building your infrastructure, testing your infrastructure, deploying your services, and managing them afterwards that you deployed, applications or services that you had. The only access that you currently can have is from this link. All the categories that we have here, I also prepared here. We can see all the services that we are currently having in Azure. I come to the overview option or app services, storage accounts that you're going to create, Azure Cosmos DB about your databases or the Kubernetes services, Azure Active Directory, which is more powerful for your identities management. Here also we are having a general look at all the services here. If any questions about services here, can go through. Can manage your network devices, NSGs, firewalls, virtual networks, or load balancers that you have on your public cloud services, which are managed with also with these virtual networks that for having routing purposes or making them alive with such good ideas or good solutions from here also with those applications and with those services from here. So we come to storage services in Azure. There are again storage options that you can choose for your servers, for your databases, or for storing purposes, storing your data purposes. Again, you can use these options from here. And web services, which we are having in Azure, also mentioned here. And all the services as well in Azure. Also, all the categories, category of services that we can have a general look at is here. We have compute services, which contain those services. We have networking services, storage, web, mobile, or containers, and as well as till DevOps services here for making, as previously talked about, making it automated for your infrastructure and the services that you're keeping them in Azure. So yes, this is what Microsoft Azure called and the services that we have and we are able to use in there. So let's talk about how Azure helps you to reduce your costs. I will have a bit details here about this service, but as mentioned earlier, that we will have a very good detailed option and the services of Azure tomorrow in migration service about how it really helps you to decrease your costs in a long-term plan when you're moving to Azure and when you plan to have some services in Azure in order to keeping them on-prem. So the businesses, as mentioned, doesn't matter what type of size, I mean, small to medium to enterprise version of enterprises and businesses. When you're moving to cloud, you are sure that in long-term plan, you are going to have a really good save of costs reduction on the equipment and the hardware that you are keeping on your local data center. So as mentioned, it allows you to rent additional processor power over the internet without having to use $1 million machines as servers. That's really one of the good options that that you can anytime increase any options that are related to your resources that you are keeping in cloud. For example, servers, applications, databases. Imagine that you're keeping them as a hardware, as a physical thing in your place. You're paying rent for that place. You're paying electricity. You're paying bandwidth, paying IT department, maintaining, cooling, and lots of thousands of tasks that you are going to deal with. This is also referred, as we checked previously, in infrastructure as a service and software as a service. This is also counts on that. You are saving saving more costs when you're moving to a public cloud provider. So there is a service also called Azure Cost Management provided by Azure. It gives you usable information about how you utilize your current services in public cloud, like in Azure, for instance, about your Azure services and the offers that Azure will give you about those services that you are using. For example, the information called you're using this service, you're paying like that for that service, and you are having a graph about that in detail about your service. And also it will offer you that you can use this in order to improve this, and you can use this to decrease the cost about this service. So as an example, I'm calling this. So any service it could be that you're using in Azure Cost Management will help you to make it more efficient. I will check for questions. The question about elasticity and capturing all possible transactions. So I would say you mean in cloud or in on-prem? But let's not talk about both of them. When you're keeping your services on-prem, for sure you're responsible for all the events that are happening and triggering currently in your infrastructure. So from lots of monitoring softwares and applications to, for instance, if we call, for example, Windows itself, a server that you're keeping in your local, you can use event services, logs, and any application that you're using or web server that you're hosting. You can check your initpub logs. And if, for instance, you're going to Azure, beside the monitoring things that you have inside your Windows server, I'm just for example, I'm calling Windows server. You are having another type of services in Azure in order to get reports about your resources. For example, one of these is Azure Cost Management, just for example, or getting other services in Azure also helps you to get more logs and more information about your resources, how your machine works, how is your machine's performance currently. Also, it gives you, as mentioned, a graph of using, for example, a 6 months, previous 6 months usage. So you can analyze all the thing about your machine, about your resource for the next steps. I hope it will help you, Mohammed. So as the time running, we are moving quickly to next slide. I thought about this slide to put it here or using it for Azure Migration Service presentation. But I thought maybe it's a good idea to have a quick overview of CapEx and OpEx here, which are used in maybe in every industry. So we are having it also in IT and cloud industry, also in Azure, to talk about that and to review the definition of these. So we have capital expenditure and operational expenditure, which referred CapEx and OpEx to spending money in CapEx on your physical infrastructure, on physical infrastructure upfront. You're paying for the infrastructure, what you're using, and deducting it by the bills and tax over the time you're using it. A good example of that could be Azure. You are paying what you are using, and by the time passes, you are getting your benefit from those services by providing any service in the cloud to your clients, and you're paying upfront again to Azure by the time passes. So as referred here, it's a major and long-term expenses plan for long-term expenses plans. In OpEx, it refers as spending money on your employee salaries, paying rent, paying for equipment, paying for property, for taxes in your local infrastructure, which we previously went through. It is called keeping your, this definition refers to keeping your data center for your own. So you are responsible for all the costs and everything and every stuff that we mentioned about on-prem services that you're keeping by yourself. Yeah, another question. Okay. So I didn't got the point, Mohammed, exactly about the segregation, but for sure for developers, you are using services for developing purposes in Azure. As we went through the services in Azure, if you're a developer that you want to automate the services in your infrastructure, you are using services which are related to your field in Azure DevOps, or if you're using some database, administration, you are coming to, using services here. And also, if you're having a team that contains all these services that you're having in cloud, so you need to have a team such administrators for developers, architectures, to plan for your whole Azure infrastructure. So if you mean by having a team, or or dividing the services for each team, so yes, as mentioned, that for each services you're keeping in cloud, for sure, if you want to be responsible for all of them, it will be somehow hard, but yes, for sure. For example, if someone is responsible to do developing, operating, administrating, architecting, so for sure you will need a team for every service, each service that you're going to use in Azure. Okay, we came to the end of our presentation today. Thank you very much for your time today we had together with this presentation. I hope it was helpful and valuable, and hope it will help for the next things, or I hope the questions solved in your mind. And I'm waiting just for next 1 minute for any questions and answers. So then can end the presentation. Okay, thank you very much. Tomorrow also will be I'll be here with Microsoft Azure Migration Service. So stay healthy and have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your precious time.
Sure. Thank you too for having this precious hosting and for this event.
Assalamu alaikum and a very good evening to you all. My name is Aiza Anwar, second year MBBS student, and I'll be your host for the remainder of the event. I would personally like to extend a warm welcome to everyone attending our day 3 of bootcamp. So without any further delay, let us continue on with our event. Our third guest speaker for the evening is Mr. Zahid Farooq. He is a senior analyst cloud solutions at Course 5i. He is an experienced IT solution expert with working experience in modern data center technology, including cloud computing, virtualization, administration, and hands-on experience into Microsoft Azure, AWS, Windows, and Cisco Internet working devices, Hyperflex, Nexus, and appliance security. Sir, please share your knowledge with us.
Yeah, hi. Assalamu alaikum everyone and good evening. So it's a pleasure to be here on my second, second time here. So yeah. If you remember on the day first, I was trying to speak about the app services. So which is one of the major, most important service which we have. And today we're gonna talk about Azure networking and Azure compute. So these are two most important things. Apart from app services, and compute is one of the most highly requested and more widely used services so far. And if you remember, like even in office, college, or university, wherever you study, you know, you have a lab, you have IT labs, you have computers, right? And you need access to the internet, you need access to the maybe, you know, inside data, whatever data you have on the university, you need to have a private access to the data. So for that, we need a common thing. That's what we call as a network. So this network thing is everywhere. Even if you are in on-premise or if you are in cloud, you need a network. So how does the network work in a cloud environment? And how do we access the virtual machines? Or we have like a number of services. Like in my first session, I was talking about app services. We have a website running on the cloud. And then I told about if we can host to this website inside a VM also. Now, in this session, we're going to talk about how this VM works, what's the process, how it is different from the machine, the laptop I have or the desktop I have, how different it is, and what are the limitations, right? So before starting, I would request everybody, if you have any questions in between the session, if you have any doubts, if you want to ask anything about the cloud, not specifically to the compute, to the VM, to the network, to the app services, you can ask me any question you have in the cloud. I would request to host, if anybody is having any questions, I will ask you to please notify immediately. So yeah, I want to make this session is very interactive.
Sure, sir, we will.
Yeah, so yeah, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Cool. All right. All right, guys. So if we talk about this network, what network we have, what kind of security we have. See, first and most important thing is, you know, when you ask someone, hey, let's move data to cloud, the first thing which whatever it comes in the mind is security. It's about, is my data safe? If I am migrating my database, if I am migrating my website, if I am migrating my anything, any services, any instance I'm trying to migrate, the first question will it be secure? Is my data secure? What kind of security is provided there? So these are the most important questions which comes in the mind. Now, if we already have a concept of working with network technologies, right? We have number of ISPs. We have, like in India, we have Airtel, Vodafone, and all. I'm sure in Pakistan you have Jazz, Qphone, and some other. So they have their own network setup, right? They give you access to the data. They give you access to the internet. They give you access to the video calling facilities, 4G, 3G, and all these. So these all are the networking technologies. Now, first of all, when I am doing a video call over a WhatsApp or FaceTime on iPhone, what does it make you feel? Is it secure if I am sharing my personal view with someone over the video call? Is it secure? Am I doing it privately? Right? So networking queries come before cloud also. So we have to make sure that we know how the technology works in the networking. So it's very simple, right? So you might have heard about encryption, encapsulations. So encryption, encapsulation are the basic things about the networking security. If I have to send a data from source to destination, source knows, like, okay, this is my text, internet connectivity. This is my text which I'm sending from source. I know this is internet connectivity, a text, or maybe a hello, and maybe a hi, how are you? Maybe a Microsoft, any text, or maybe an image, or maybe a song. We know that, okay, this is an internet connectivity text. When a receiver will receive this data, when a destination will receive this data, it will be again the same internet connectivity. But do you think, like in between, like from my mobile to my destination mobile phone or any device, will it be the same? No, it can't be, right? So there's a lot of process. The data is break down into the segments. Maybe if you are already in the university or a college, you might have heard about the OSI, Open System Interconnection. So that's basically a reference model, right? We know how the packets, how the segments have the segmentation offset and all the process, like how the data is converted to binary. So there's a one stage, but that doesn't make it secure. We are just breaking down the data. That doesn't make it secure. But how we make it secure is through the encryption. We will change it. Instead of I, we can send. We can change it. Maybe instead of I will write down A. But I will have a coder and decoders, encryptors and decryptors in the both sides, right? They know, okay, I stands for A here. So this is how the security works. So this is the basic security which we have everywhere. It's not about cloud, it's about your WhatsApp, it's about your Facebook, IMO, whatever you use. It's basic encryption process. Now, if we talk about this specifically to the cloud, in cloud we have n number of NVA, network virtual appliances, right? Now, if we talk about on-premises, if we have university network, if we have like Jazz network, they have their own firewalls. Customized firewall. What firewall is? Firewall is, it prevents data breaches, it prevents cross-script attacks, it prevents any kind of anonymous access. So basically what it will do is it will just cross-check. If the data coming from any source is reliable, does it contain any kind of a virus, does it contain any kind of malware, so it will cross-check. Does it come from any specific source? Does it have a source code inside of it? So basic thing, firewall. So this firewall is inside of your office, is inside of your university, is inside of your college, is inside of the Azure data centers. All right, so the main point is here the Azure firewall. All right, Azure firewall is a native to Azure. So Microsoft was the first one in the cloud world to introduce native firewall. That was Azure firewalls. All right, so and I guess I was the first person in the Microsoft to reply on the query of the Azure firewall, because see, whenever any new service comes in the market, firstly it will be in a private view. Private view means it will be utilized by the Microsoft users, Microsoft employees to see how it works. After then, there comes a stage, it will be released to the public preview. Public preview will be for everyone. Depends upon the availability in the region. So public preview is free. Okay, you don't need to pay for that, and Microsoft is not providing any support there. Okay, there is no SLA, there is no service level agreement for public preview services now, but Microsoft has to see how the things go on the back end, right? Are my users happy with the services? Are there any kind of backlogs with the services? What needs to be improved? Are there any kind of bugs there? How to improve that bugs and all? I was actually working for that such team when I was in Microsoft. So there's a team who actually works closely and experiences these things and works with the product group and tries to create a new product. Now, when the firewall came, this firewall thing, native firewall, or you say NVA firewall, there are like number of vendors who give you this firewall services. So like Cisco, Palo Alto, Juniper, and many more. And then Azure came with their own native firewall. That's Azure firewall, and it simply does the prevents Okay, it prevents any data breaches, any unattended access. It will prevent any cross-script attacks. It will prevent any DDoS attacks. Okay, so this is the main security a company is using. Apart from this, Microsoft Azure has given an option to choose your third-party firewall as well. See, you are like your company or university is trusting Cisco for security. Now, this Microsoft Azure has given you inbuilt feature from the marketplace where you can deploy any third-party firewall that should be supported. Now, so the security is increasing. So first week came your Azure firewall, then came your encryption, decryption, and all the process. Then came you can use your customized firewalls. Then came the concept of this VPN concept. Okay, you can use VPN also. Say, hey, I'm trying to migrate data from my Azure or from my on-premises to the Azure. What I should use? Okay, what I should use? Now, if I have some important data to be migrated, I will make sure that my data goes through a specific channel, goes through a specific end-to-end communication. That's what firewall is, okay? That's what the firewall does, and that's what the VPN does. So in VPN, we have two types. We have IKE, we have IPsec. So these are the two channels, or we can call them as a transport, a secure transport, which gives you access to the data privately without, any middleman attacking, without any middleman checking the data. So we are making one-to-one communication. Now, this Azure Virtual Network is very wide, very vast, and it's kind of large thing, okay? Because all the services, say if I have, we have app services, web app, mobile apps, we have Azure Storage, we have Azure Active Directory, we have Azure Compute, we have Azure Functions, we have Azure IoT, we have Azure Machine Learnings, we have Azure Event Hub. So n number of services. These n number of services are communicating through a network. All right. So there's a inbuilt like a database network, a virtual machine network, an app service network. Then if we look to the Azure data center, there's a physical network. Okay, there are switches, there are firewalls, there are cables, there are NIC, RJ45 fiber, there are a number of devices. But that's Azure data set, Azure data center. What about a common consumer like me? I'm using Azure services. So what network option I have? So we have the basic, first of all, if we talk about the basic concept of Azure network, we have Azure VNet. Okay, so Azure Virtual Network. All right, Azure Virtual Network. So Azure Virtual Network is nothing but like a common example I will talk about is switch. Okay, we have a switch, right? In office we have a switch, or in university we have a switch where a LAN cable is connected to the router, from router again, the router to switch, from switch to computers to give you access to the network, maybe inside network or maybe to the internet. So VNet does that in the Azure. So in the VNet, we have subnets. So subnet is the subdivision of the network. So if I have one network, inside that I can create multiple subnets. So subnet will be used for different purposes. Maybe say I will use subnet A for virtual machines. I will subnet 2 for app services. I will use subnet 3 for like databases. So again, I will like segregate. Segregate means creating a separate layer, dividing the network or dividing the full like, for example, say in a university, I have an administration team, I have an accounting team, I have a lecturer team, I have a student team. So I will again create a subnet. So subnets, what they will do is they have a different level of accesses, different level of permissions. So again, inside the VNet we can create multiple subnets, and in subnets we can apply we can keep different services. Again, so here you can see like front-end connectivity, load balancer, direct IPs, access control list, DDoS protection, traffic manager, Azure DNS. So I was talking about this DDoS protection. That's what Azure Firewall does. Okay, Azure Firewall will prevent any kind of denial death of services, any kind of flooding, any kind of cross scripting attack. Anybody knows what DDoS attack is? Let me know. I will check it later. Yeah, if anybody knows what DDoS attack is. So DDoS is simply like, if I have a capacity of receiving 10 packets, 20 packets, 30 packets in a single loop. But in DDoS, there is some process known as flooding, okay? Flooding of different packet. It can be an acknowledgement packet. It can be a synchronizing packet. So when that happens, when flooding happens, what will happen is it will take down the service. Say maybe you are running any website, okay? That's very important. If anybody does that attack on DDoS attack on the website, simply what will happen is your website will be offline. All right, you might lose transactions, you might lose customers, you might lose some data. So Azure is making sure that it is safeguarding your data from these DDoS. No flooding possibly can happen, no fuzzing can happen. So it has these, this is the old presentation. They have mentioned DDoS, but yeah, now we have Azure Firewall. Azure Firewall will work. It will just simply, not allow any kind of services which are unknown, which it seems to be hazardous, which it seems to be that might be infected with virus, with malware or Trojan or anything, such specific things. So it will block them. Now what ACL is, access control list. So access control list is simply like, is giving control over data, over services, or maybe an instance to some specific users, or maybe some specific IPs, or maybe some permissions, maybe, just simply like, we have read, write permissions. So we can read, we can write, or maybe if I disable read permission, you will not be able to read it. If I'm just giving a common example, okay, ACL. So there is something different what ACL is, but it is simply control, putting control over the users or over the services, over the network. All right. Then Azure DNS. What DNS does is simply changes name to IP. There's a common definition that everybody will tell you. DNS is, it simply translates name to IP, IP to name. That's it. But yeah, it does the same thing. But there's a process. There's a process to do the things in Azure. In the DNS, not specifically we're talking about Azure. We can take an example of any DNS we have. So there are different type of zones. All right. So there are different type of records available. Every record will have a different utilization. Every record will have a different overview, different use. Say example, I will give an example. You have a website abc.com. abc.com is your website. And for that website, you have an IP, maybe 10.1.1.1. So abc.com is a name. Then 10.1.1.1 is an IP address, so it's a number, right? So, but they both will use different records. Remember, when I'm accessing data through the abc.com, or maybe it's not about website, it can be a VM. Sometimes a VM will have a name, maybe say like vm1.abc.com. So I'm accessing through the name. So when I'm accessing any service through the name, the request will go forwarded to the CNAME. CNAME is a type of record. CNAME is a type of record which is triggered when I am using name. It can be abc.com, it can be vm.abc.com, any name. So when I am using name, remember, we are using CNAME records. Okay, we are using CNAME records. When I am utilizing through the IP, maybe 10.1.1.1. So that time A record will be triggered because A record will use IP address. So this is the DNS. So now, why do we have this Azure DNS? If we already have the, we have the DNS services, we have public DNS, we have private DNS. To access anything on the web, remember, to access any services on your browser or the internet, we have to use DNS. So DNS is the key. DNS will locate where the data is. All right, it will locate. So maybe you might have experienced this thing very clearly. In Pakistan, when you do google.com, by default, automatically it will change to google.co.pk. Right? If I'm in India, so it will change to google.co.in. So why does it change from .com to .in, .pk? So because of this DNS. So this DNS will identify where from the request came. It came from Pakistan. Okay, let's locate to the Pakistan server. Let's locate it to the Pakistan server. So again, so Azure DNS, Azure have regions. Azure have Indian regions. Azure have the Gulf. Azure have Singapore. Azure have regions in East US, West US, everywhere, UK. So many more regions. So it will locate. So it will make sure that the traffic. Why did I discuss this traffic manager before? Because I want to discuss about Azure DNS before I go deep into the traffic manager side. So traffic manager is, again, it closely works with the DNS. Remember, traffic manager is like traffic manager and Azure DNS is like a couple. Okay, if you are using a service with a traffic manager, it has to go through the DNS because through the DNS only it will identify, okay, from where it came. Okay, so these are the very important things which we need to understand. Why does I use traffic manager? Why does I use Azure DNS? So traffic manager will, what it will do is it will have endpoints. Okay, it will have endpoints. Say example I will give you. You are running a website which has a users in the UK, say in the Europe, in the Asia, in the Russia, multiple regions, or maybe in the Middle East. Now, if you are hosting this website inside of Pakistan, maybe users from Europe will find difficult to access it. Maybe users from Middle East might find difficult to access it. Maybe sometimes if the website goes down in the Pakistan, maybe the data center is down. So what will happen is, so there will be totally blackout of the services. No user can access the services either in Pakistan, in India, anywhere. So to make sure that the requests are forwarded from one region to another region. If the one region is busy, depends upon the probe, depends upon the health, depends upon the availability. If the region is down, by default, automatically, the traffic manager, what it does with the help of Azure DNS, it will forward to the different region so that I will have a continuous availability of my services, of my data, of my users and everything. So these are the very important things about how the Azure network works. So they have their own DNS, they have their own traffic manager, they have their own firewalls, they have integrated NVA systems and everything. So this is the common example how it works. So we have VPN, we have, and again, this one more thing, express route. So I guess I have told you something about this express route on my first session, but yeah, if anybody has not joined that time, but yeah, let me make clear what express route is. So express route is a dedicated connection from your data center to the Azure data center. That's provided by the local ISPs. Say in India, we have Airtel. Okay, Airtel is an ISP which is closely working with the Microsoft Azure data centers. If I want a specific channel, if I want any dedicated channel from my data center to the Azure data center, I will ask for express route. Yeah, this option will be used for the people who have more money. Okay, they have, because it will cost more. Okay, because this is something which is you are taking a privileged service. in a flight you have business class, so business class have privileges, right? They have all the special services. So again, this express route is nothing but a business class. You have to pay more, you get more. So any questions on this? If any questions, please just type it. Then I will request the moderator to let me know. All right, so yeah, we have, this internet connectivity, intra-regional connectivity, cross-premises. So this is one of the same thing, right? We have internet connectivity is using the traffic manager endpoints that I was talking about. We have, if I have any website in India, I will say it, okay, endpoint 1. In Pakistan, endpoint 2. So, right, so traffic manager will work on the endpoint. So every endpoint will be in a different DNS region. It will be in a different DNS region. So what will happen is, like, if I am accessing any data over the internet from the region A, now this region goes down. If I have traffic manager, by default, automatically what will happen is my request will be forwarded to region B, region 2nd. So this is how it works. So IP reservation is again the same thing. We will have a specific IPs, public IPs, which will be for a dedicated. See what will happen in Azure. There's a kind of thing, when you have any website, when you have any VM, you have an option to choose the public IP. So that public IP will be specifically for you. That's not going to change, but only it will change if you delete the NIC card, if you delete the VM, or if you delete the app services, or if you delete the SSL binding, IP is going to be changed. And some people have the concept. Okay, so see here I'm telling you the difference about the on-premises, about the cloud. See, if we remember, we have kind of DHCP, dynamic host control protocol, which will provide you IPs automatically to the computers, to the servers, to the any network devices. But what's the option here? See, in the DHCP, they have reservations. Okay, they have a lease duration. So maybe say if I'm giving IP a validity of 30 days. So after 30 days, the IP will be released from my machine and new IP will come. That thing is not going to happen on the cloud. Okay, in cloud, if IP is for you, it's for you until unless you delete it. Okay, now there's no kind of validity. Now in the on-premises, if you restart the machine, if you delete, if you shut down the machine and start again, IP might change. But if you restart any Azure virtual machine, if you shut down the Azure virtual machine, IP is not going to get changed. So IP will still be the same, whatever you have used. Okay, under the bone infrastructure of the Azure data center. Yeah.
Slides are not changing.
All right, sure. Thanks for notifying. Maybe I have shared this single desktop. Yeah, just a moment. Is it? Are you able to see now?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so again, I was talking about this IP thing. So the IP will not change. Even if you restart the machine, if you shut down the machine in the Azure, it will not change until you delete it. Okay, there are ways. See, maybe earlier trainers might have told you about this. There are two things in the Azure. One is classic portal that was previously, then there is ARM, Azure Resource Manager. Okay, this is very important. See, especially for you guys, when you go for an interview, they will ask this question. All right, they will ask you what's the difference between classic portal and ARM. All right, so in classic portal, everything is integrated. Okay, if you have to delete if you have to do any changes, you have to delete whole VM, Maybe it is storage, maybe it is storage disk, OS disk, or maybe NIC card, whatever you are using. In the previously, in the classic portal, if you had to do any changes, you had to delete all. But then Azure came with a new concept, okay, because you might have to change whole stuff. They came with the concept of ARM, Azure Resource Manager. Maybe it's sometimes it's known as ARM. Okay, some people call it ARM, some people call it ARM. I generally call this an ARM, Azure Resource Manager. So Azure Resource Manager will give you privilege to the individual services. Like say in my computer, in my desktop, in my laptop, in my mobile phone, I have a network port, I have a storage, I have a RAM, I have a ROM, I have a display, and all these things, right? So every part is an individual. All right, so they are not overlapped. In classic portal, it used to be overlapped. Okay, it used to be overlapped, so you can't. If I do anything, I have to delete everything. But if we talk about this ARM, if this service is no more user, I want to change. I will just delete this service. Okay, instead of that, I will use some other service. So may it be a storage, may it be a disk, may it be an NIC port, may it be any kind of extension. We can delete, we can add them. So that's the difference between classic portal and ARM portal. Okay, so these are the IP reservation. You can reserve the IPs. So intra-region communication, internal load balancing. So internal load balancing is that what I was telling you about is creating a load balancing environment. If say there are two things in the Azure, and again this is the highly requested question, and they ask in the interviews. So they might ask you about, okay, there are two things, fault domain and update domain. In availability set of an Azure, there are two things. Because we are talking about this load balancing thing, and this comes under the availability. Availability set, availability zone, availability region. Now I'm talking about availability set. In availability set, there are two things. One is fault domain and one is update domain. All right. So inside a data center, there are racks. Okay, in the rack, there will be multiple servers. In the multiple servers, there will be different VMs. Inside the VM, there's somewhere where the data is. That's where the VM is. Now, what will happen if my one VM goes down? So definitely I will not have access to the data. Now, Azure is doing an option. Okay, why don't you have multiple VMs? If one goes down, you can use other one, right? For availability. But in a single rack, if I have a rack, in a single rack, there will be a one power common system and one common switch, network switch. All right. Now, if the VM goes down, I can use other VM. What will happen if the switch goes down? What will happen if the power failure for that particular rack? So all the VMs are down, so I lost availability. That will happen in a very unfortunate moment, but yeah, still it can happen. There was a time in 2018 when I was in a Microsoft, one of the regions of the Azure data center went down, the cooling system went down, all the services were shut. So possibly anytime it can happen. So that's why it's advised. That's why in my first session also I told you to keep a backup of the VM to the apps to the data, anything you have. If it is crucial, if it's important, keep a backup. So fault domain, what will happen? It will in the single rack, it will create a multiple VMs of same data. If one goes down, other one will be used, but it will share a common switch, common rack. So if any physical damage, every fault domain will be down. Update domain will be, this is because mostly like everybody will be using Windows machines, Windows laptops. So when the update comes, it needs a restart, right? So, but if there is some important services which are used at the moment, but it needs a restart, right? If I restart the services, my users will go down. So what will happen is update domain. On the backend, there will be many VMs. So if one is restarting, other one will take place with zero downtime. Okay, so other one will take place. Then other one will spin in. That will be updated. Rest other one will come into the live picture. You know, it will be utilized. So this is the load balancing part of the. Now, again, as we know, like we talk about this virtual network in the cloud. What if I have two VNets? I have VNet 1, I have VNet 2. Can they communicate? Because maybe I have one VNet in the India and one VNet in Pakistan. How do I communicate these? Because they are two different countries. They are like they have different data, but how do they communicate? They communicate through the VNet to VNet. There's a term, specific term used for it is VNet peering. Okay, VNet peering is nothing but a routing from one VNet to another VNet to multiple regions. All right, so then there's a multi-site VPN. So multi-site VPN is again, the thing is like, you know, maybe for example, say Microsoft. We have a data center in Europe, in India, in Asia, in Africa, mostly like I guess Azure have almost 50 plus data centers for the Azure. So to communicate between them, they will share a common VPNs. All right, I will not create a one-to-one or one VPN. Okay, from this to A, one VPN, then one VPN to A to B, from A to C, one VPN, A to B. No, I will create a common infrastructure, a common network setup. That is the multi-site VPN, one-to-one, many-to-many. Okay, many-to-many communication. Then cross-region is that's what I was telling you. This VNet, we have VNet peering, and one more is global VNet peering. So that's cross-region. So this express route I already spoken about. All right, so these are the things like, you know, reverse DPR. That's what I was talking about. PTR pointers, traffic manager, nested that you will find, and this thing, network security group. So this network security group is all the policies you apply on the network. Queue, okay, enable port 443. So that means data will be accessed to the HTTPS. So if you want access of the VM or a web app or anything which is underlying in the energy, you have to use policies. You have to enable the ports. You have to enable the rules. You have to, you know, use IPs. You have to use ports to, you know, enable or disable them. Like say, if I block port 53, DNS request will be blocked because DNS uses port 53. If I block 20, so FTP will be down. If I block 443, HTTPS will be down. HTTPS will be down. So all these things, you know, maybe 3096. So there are like different scenarios. Like you know, where every database will have a different port. So it depends on what type of database you are using. So if you want, there should be a communication from my database to the VM to any network part. You have to enable the ports. Okay. So again, multi-net. So you see, these Azure is making everything possible. Like if you talk about in the university or in a college or in the office, you might have a server, and those servers have like, you know, maybe 2 or 3 NIC ports. So, but Azure is making that happens. They are making possible through the multiple NIC. So if one NIC fails in the VM, other one will be working. So I will have a backup NICs. All right. So these are the common things. You will find these things in the on-premises network. But yeah, the terminology changes. You know, we have express route, we have you know, IPsec that I was telling you about. There are 2 types of configurations. One is IPsec, one is IKE that are used for VPN and firewall configurations. So that's what it is. So yeah, I guess I have cleared pretty much of it, and yeah, you can still have the visibility where it. All right, so yeah, so we have this, this common services shared over the internet, where we need a load balancing, we need a traffic manager, we need an application gateway. Okay, and yeah, one more thing I forgot to mention here is in app services there is dedicated firewall. Okay, for any website which is running on the Azure, you can deploy web application firewall. That's known as a WAF. Okay, WAF, web application firewall, where you can allow some rules or deny some rules, or you can, it will basically, what it will do is it will again, block any kind of unwanted access, cross-security attack, DDoS attacks, and then XML attacks. So whatever is happening, like any kind of false information is possible, so it will block. So application gateway and web application firewall overlap. Okay, if you have to deploy any of these, you have to deploy application gateway. So this is the load balancer. Okay, so that, I guess you should be able to figure it out what I was talking previously about the load balancer. So yeah, depends upon the availability, the load balancer will be placed here. Client will send a request to, depends upon the availability, the VM is spinning, it will forward. Application that requires multiple connections to the same server. All right, so it will make sure that that possibly happens. So idle timeout is, in the networking. So this is pretty much like, you might have experienced these things, and I'm giving an example. Log into the internet banking. Automatically, if you don't, if you're idle for some time, maybe it depends upon space. So if you remember, on the internet banking website, there is SSL, or there is transport layer security, TLS, SSL. So they have the policies, customized policies. If you are not doing any action on the website for maybe 180 seconds, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes, maybe 60 seconds, depends. Automatically you will log out. So that's the idle timeout. You can change it. So that's possibly happening in the pretty much here also. So filter connections, you can these are access control lists. You can filter based on the IP, based on the ports. As you said, VM with VMs or subnets. So that I was about VM to the subnet to the NIC also. Okay, because this is, I guess, the old presentation PPT, but yeah, now you can apply this energy to the NIC as well. Okay, not to the VM level, you can apply it to the NIC level. Okay, so this is what it looks like. You can block ports, you can block IPs, you can, yeah, many more things. Access control can be updated independent of the VM. So access control list will be pretty much available for every VM. Will have a different requirement. Maybe I have a VM1 where I have a database. I need a database ports to be accessed with a net. So yeah, I will enable there also. Maybe in some, I just want to have access to some specific services. I don't want HTTPS. I don't want anything. I just want FTP, maybe port 22. So like. So this is, demilitarize its zone in the virtual network. So how it works, load balancing, how the load balancing will work. So internal load balancing will work inside of the Azure data centers, outside of the Azure data center, from data centers, there is internal load balancing. So again, these are the energies, network security groups which you can use. All right, so there is no direct communication. You can't bypass. Okay, you can't bypass these cross checks or anything. So these virtual appliances. So yeah. Right. So yeah, you can have multi VM. multi-NICs. Depends upon the purpose. You can apply different permissions, policies, cycle, all those things. Right? Appliance ecosystem. All right, that's what I was telling about. We have a marketplace where you can deploy. Barracuda is there. We have Strix, we have Riverbed, Steelhead, Steelab, we have Cisco Meraki, we have, yeah, see, let me tell you one thing. You know, it's not necessary that whatever is available on the internet, that only is possible. Possibilities are beyond the availability on the internet. All right, see, I remember one instance, like when a customer came to me. Whenever he already had a Cisco Meraki purchased for some other cloud vendor, but he like read it from the document that Cisco Meraki is not supported, even though it was clearly mentioned Cisco Meraki is not supported. But since I already had the experience working with the firewall and all these infrastructures, I thought like let me try. So I tried to create a architecture for that. It worked. So for that customer, it worked. Yeah. So it's not necessary that whatever you read on the internet is that's only possible. No, there are a lot of possibilities. That's why you need to evaluate. You need to utilize it. You need to use it to know it better. Okay. See, you don't need to to learn the cloud. You just need the internet, right? You already have the access to the Azure portal using the students subscriptions, and you already have the access to the video tutorials. You just see the video, learn, try to utilize. Windows desktops, yeah. So these are the services which you can access, you know, everywhere. So there are a lot of things, you know. I will tell you talk about dear moderator, how much time I have left here for, because I don't want to exceed my limits. Hello. I guess I still have some time. All right, so yeah, see, there are a lot of integrated services in the cloud. Let me see if anybody has any questions here. All right, so I will take the questions now. No, see, you can't. So when you create an availability set, that time only you have to mention like which services you have, which VMs you have. You can't add it after that. Okay, so there's a question one. What protocols are supported by the application gateway? Application gateway will support any kind of protocol which is using web version, like say HTTP, HTTPS, these SQL basic ports, because it basically gives access to the web, right? So web-based FTP is used, HTTP, HTTPS, DNS, so all these, until you block them. If you are using application gateway with the web application firewall, you might block some services. Say for example, you previously had an administrator in your organization. That person has used application gateway with the web application firewall, and he has blocked port 880, port 80. That's for HTTP. Okay. Now what will happen is you are trying to access the data over HTTP. It will not work. Right. So you have to make sure you check the list, like whatever is blocked and whatever is not. So you can pretty much use all the protocols which are used over the internet. Okay, how to restrict inbound or outbound traffic? So inbound and outbound traffic can be restricted using NHGs, using firewall, using mostly like if I don't see, if I have a one website, if I have one VM. So for that, I don't need a firewall because that will be costly for me. So as simply I will use network security group. Network security group will block all the data, whatever you want to block. It will only allow whatever you want to allow. So NSGs. So in NSGs, when you create NSG, you have to deploy it to the VNet, to deploy it to the subnet, deploy it to the VM. So then you have to choose policies, maybe block port 443, HTTP is blocked, block 53, DNS is blocked. So all the traffic will be blocked. It depends upon the rules. So in the NSG, we have two rules, inbound and outbound rules. Yeah, so network security group is simply, just imagine it's a firewall, cheapest firewall, which is made available for all the services in the cloud of the Azure, where you can deploy to the network. Any services which is deployed to the VNet and subnet, you can deploy NSG. You can apply NSG. So it is basically block unattended access, any kind of, or maybe sometimes, you know what, NSG can also work. Okay, I want only access through the IP, no ports, only through the IP. There are some specific IPs, like I will give example. Say I want to access data through 10.10.10.10. So only 10.10.10 will be allowed to the network. Rest will be blocked. So you can block through the IPs, you can allow through the IPs, you can block through the ports, you can allow through the ports. All right. How to create network security rule? Network security rule is created again. So there, one is the energy side, which I was explaining to you guys. You can either do it through the firewall. Okay, you have firewall. In the firewall, you set up rules. Okay, so every firewall have a different rule. Like Barracuda will have a different, Palo Alto have a different, Azure firewall have a different. Again, the rules are two types: inbound and outbound. Inside connection, outside connection. Cool. Any more questions you have? I'm open to any questions you have, not about networking. You can drop in any question about you have in the cloud, you have in the Azure. If anybody is having any questions, they can drop it here. How much time will you have for the session?
Sir, if you want to share anything, you can continue.
All right, sure. Thank you so much. So yeah, let's go with this. This is virtual machines, okay? Okay. This cloud service, okay? Cloud service is not used anymore now. I know I'm showing you like some outdated presentations, but yeah, this is still you should be aware about what cloud service was. So cloud service is VM. All right. So if you remember on the first day also I told you about inside of the VM you can host databases, you can host websites, you can host any services which you keep on. Like say you have a you have a server, you have a desktop. For whatever purpose you are using this desktop, you can use virtual machine for that purpose also. You can store maybe like see Linux based websites in the Apache. You have IIS for Windows based platform. So there are two types of disks available in the virtual machine. One is OS image, one is disk data. All right. So now first of all, why do we have two types of images and see example? Whenever you have a desktop or a laptop, you have a hard drive, right? Inside of the hard drive, is empty. You purchase a new laptop, so you have to reformat it to some image, maybe Windows 10, maybe Windows Server, maybe Linux Server. So for that, you need OS image. That OS image is by default given by Microsoft. You can use it. All right, then we have data disks that's used for storing the data. Now, there's a common question. What if I have some operating system which is not available in Microsoft? How do I use that? Or I don't want to use Microsoft based operating system. I have my own operating system. How do I use it? How can I use my pre-owned or pre-configured OS in the Azure, which I have in my own data center, which I have in my own premises. How do I use that? See, first of all, we have to look to the possible ways how to deploy and how to create and how to deploy an Azure VM. So there are different ways. Most common way which we know is Azure portal. Go to the Azure portal, create a resource group. Inside the resource group, create a VM and give the permission and everything. How do you want to use it? You want to use through SSH, you want to use RDP, so done. All right, so that's it common. Then comes your PowerShell. So through the PowerShell you can deploy. Then comes your CLI, you can deploy through. But there's one more way, that's ARM templates. ARM templates you can use. So inside the ARM template, you can use your own customized image that you have. See, what you need to do is from your on-premises, you can migrate data simply, like migrate. Initially it used to be very tough practice, but it's very easy now because we have Azure Migrate for assessments and for migration. That's pretty much very simple. But no, I don't want to migrate all data. VM, I don't want to migrate. I just want to convert my C drive to the OS disk image and upload it to the cloud, upload it to the storage. After uploading it to the storage, then I will integrate with the ARM template. ARM template I will create virtual machine. Now, second scenario is like, hey, I had to deploy 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 VMs. I don't want to do it one by one. Can you tell me some process? Yes, there's automation for that. Automation you can use, or maybe you can use ARM templates. ARM templates, what you need to do is simply run. It will create a new. You just need to run it and change the prefix name, change the name, change the region, change the subscription, change the resource group, whatever possibilities. So ARM templates, you can deploy any kind of services. You can deploy a VM with in a VM. Inside of the VM there is operating system, there's IIS, there's a pre-built website. You can deploy through ARM. So full customized setup you can deploy through the ARM. So yeah, and the VMs comes in different size. We have like graphic M series, we have S series, P series VMs are there available. So they have their own bandwidth, they have their CPU cores, they have their storage. So make sure that you choose whatever is. And again, in the storage, there is premium storage, premium, and there is, yeah, there are a lot of things. You can go and check them out anytime. See, this was what I was telling about the fault domain, same rake, same server, update domain. That's pretty much I have already cleared. Yeah, I don't go with the slides, so I just So this is how it will work, right? It's a fault in update domain. So if one goes down, other one will be usable. But they will share common switch, they will share common server, common rack, common maybe a common server as well. If anything goes down, it will not work. So that's why we should have a separate backup. Maybe different region, maybe different data center, maybe a different, if not different data center, maybe a different rack at least. If one rack goes down, see, condition is if they are in the same VM. If VM goes down, everything goes down. If the VMs are in a different servers, but different server will share a common server, common rack, common switch. If switch goes down, rack goes down, completely down. Now, if you are keeping them in a different rack, one rack goes down, other rack will work. But if the data center goes down, so it's simply all the data will be down. So we have a multi-site backup. We have a multi-region backups. All right. So that's pretty much it. If you have any questions here, you can drop them. Meanwhile, apart from this session, if anyone of you anytime need any suggestions in like how to be career oriented in the cloud and how to prepare yourself for the interviews and how to be updated with the new technologies in the cloud, and if you have any interview questions and anything, you can just simply like search my name on the LinkedIn, Zahid Farouk, or maybe I have a universal ID ZFNT99. ZFNT99. ZFNT99 that I will request moderator to share it. My ID is ZFNT99. You can anytime just search this in a Google. So this is my universal ID. Okay. Microsoft document says with 2 or more machines, availabilities are given 99.95 availability. If this is the case, why we have 3 maximum fault domains, 20 maximum update domains? If I choose a maximum of both, would I get more availability than 95? If not, what is the purpose of having more update domains? Yes, a good question. But yeah, since I told you like the fault domains can be in the underlying the same rig, what would happen? Like, you know, the VM, if the rack goes down, what will happen? You lost your availability, right? So to keep, see, still 99.95 is way beyond our imagination. So it's like maybe like 5 seconds in a year. I'm not sure about that much of downtime you can expect. But now, why do we choose like so this is the maximum option they are giving. So you don't need to use 5. You don't need to use like 20. You can use 1. You can use 2. You can use 3. It depends upon your like how much availability you want your data to be. So this is the maximum option they have given. See, some customers are using like say a bank. They have stored a bank application inside of the VM. So don't you think that needs more availability? That like I don't want to hear any excuse from Microsoft. Hey, no, you don't have any backup. Your data went down. Your website went down. Your VM went down. So to make sure that I have proof, okay, hey, as Microsoft, I already purchased this availability set, right? And with this like 5 default domains, 5 update domains, I don't want to hear any excuses because see what will happen is this will still be in the same region. So Microsoft will not be responsible if the region goes down. So make sure that, you know, if the critical websites are there, if the critical data is there, you should make sure that you keep them in a separate data centers. That's what we call as in redundancy, geo-redundancy, zonal, local, LRS, ZRS, DRS, we have for the storage. So same will happen for the replication also. You have a local, you have a zonal, you have a global. So always if there's any critical websites, like we have some services in the Azure which are by default using global. So because I will give an example, my website which has a user base, which has a customer from across the globe. So I make sure that this is available across the region, across the globe. So I will use GRS type thing, right? I will keep global geolocations in consideration. All right. I have that clears your question. Any more questions? So meantime, if any questions, if you need any career sessions in the future, you can just simply go through my universal ID ZFNT99. You can always reach out to me. I will be glad to help you. And yeah, it was really I hope this was helpful for you guys. Yeah, happy learning and enjoy. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing insight knowledge with us. Thank you so much for your precious time. And last but not the least, our fourth guest speaker for today's session of the bootcamp. He is CEO at Woodgrove Management and Top 100 Leaders Award winner in global healthcare. He is Systems Security Architect at BNCPF. He is former CIO at Vambas Medicals. He won the Best Dance Group Management Firm Award at Global Hospitality Awards 2019 by Lux Life Magazine UK. He is expert in IT infrastructure management, digital transformation, cybersecurity management, training and development, strategic team leadership, project management, data center management, forecasting, contract negotiations, vendor management, and cost optimization. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome Mr. George Kavalakis. Sir, over to you.
Hello, everybody. I hope that you can hear me well. Thank you for the introduction. Can you hear me well?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Perfect. Let me share my screen. So Thank you for having me to this wonderful event. I hope that many of you learn enough, and if the rest of the group can mute their microphones because I have turned on the sound. Well, I'm here to talk about Share Console and how to use it. This is something different from what we have heard till now. I hope you enjoy it. It's for personal experience, and it's something that I find very, very useful. And I hope that you find it as well. It would be a bit different than the other presentations, I guess. How am I? I had the first introduction. I'm a risk management and security architect at BNP Paribas Fortis in Belgium. I won top 100 leaders in global healthcare last year for my work after 14 years in the healthcare industry. I'm founder and CEO of Hotel Management. That's something different with the IT. It has to do with artists, music, DJs, dancing, and stuff like that. And by that showcases my experience also in business and marketing. We have 2 international awards, and I'm also a member of the Greek communities like this that have created this amazing event that you're watching today and the previous days and tomorrow. I'm a speaker, I'm an entrepreneur, gamer, a pen test hobbyist. That's why I'm in security, and I'm a hip hop enthusiast that comes to the thing that I have met many different cultures. So, our agenda for today. The whole thing about my presentation is that I had issues with my virtual machines on Azure in some occasions. So we will start in how we can troubleshoot on Azure, some common problems, some quick solutions. We will talk about what emergency management system is, and that brings CR console. Then we will see how it works with Windows virtual machines, Linux, and we will see live some scenarios. The need that gave me the idea for this presentation is that I couldn't connect to my virtual machine, and I was able to do that yesterday. I guess many of you have came to that point that you're trying to do something, and that it was working a couple of minutes ago or one day before, and suddenly we come to a point that we get messages like this, that in my case I was trying to connect through putting my Linux machine, but I couldn't do it. So I was trying to find a way in order to troubleshoot this, in order to avoid setting the whole thing again. By searching around, you could see that many people had issues either to connect via remote desktop or via SSH to the virtual machines. And as you can understand, this can be frustrating. Either you're a developer that you're doing your work on Azure, a DevOps or administrator, you're trying to work there. So that was the funny thing, that we were trying to make our virtual machines talk to me, but no answer. Nobody's there, or at least the virtual machines doesn't want to talk to us back. So what are our options in case that we face something like this? Okay, we can redeploy in the previous versions of Azure, because the platform is being updated very, very often, and new features come to the experience every day. And for example, the redeployment of a virtual machine, it was the common solution in order to fix your issues of connectivity. In that case, you should create your virtual machine from scratch. Right now, Microsoft has the option of redeploy. You can click on redeploy, and we'll discuss later what redeploy does. The other thing is to diagnose and solve problems. There are a list of solutions that we can choose from. It also has the run command that we can just run a command in order to do something on our virtual machine. For example, when I was preparing my lab, my personal password on the virtual machine expired, and or at least I couldn't remember it. I don't know. So I went via run command, and I gave the proper command in order to change my user's password. And the last one that we will talk today is the serial console, that for me acts like a safe mode. I want to tell you that I will showcase that serial console is a tool that can be used from troubleshooting scenarios up to penetration testing scenarios, or network scanning, or whatever you will see in the process. About the redeploy that we discussed a few minutes back, when you redeploy a virtual machine right now, Azure will shut down the virtual machine, move it to a new node in the infrastructure, and then turn it back on in order to use it. But that's not the case that every time it works, but it's a very good solution and to know how to use it. The other thing is to diagnose and solve problems. As you can see, that's, and we will see it live on Azure later. We have many things that you can do. For example, as you can see, to resolve connection issues in your virtual machine, and you have many actions that you can do, can restart, resize, and you have tools like to reset the password. In my case, that I wanted to reset the password, it wasn't a built-in administrator account, it was a different account. It was also the option for serial console and to check the video diagnostics, also to redeploy a virtual machine. The run command, I can show it to you right now. You can go to your virtual machine. Right now in my lab, I have a Windows 10 running, a Windows Server 2019, and Kali Linux for our purposes. So what's the run command? The run command can be found under the operations, and here it has some things that can run for you outside within the browser in order to fix things or to do whatever you like in your virtual machine. For example, the thing that has, since I guess negative, has some limitations. And for example, if I come here, you can run, obviously, type a whole script. I will just run here. We will need to wait a few seconds. I think it's 20. We will check it out, and the output will be found here. So from this, I can also do many other commands that might help me gain access or fix something on my virtual machine while I know what is going wrong. The other thing that I do very often when I have problems connecting is to check the boot diagnostics here in order to be sure in what screen my virtual machine is at the moment. So right here, I can see that it is up and running. So getting back to the run command here, I closed it. I shouldn't do, but either way, not to wait. Let's go for the restrictions. The output is limited to the last 4096 bytes. The minimum time to run the script, a script or a command or whatever is 20 seconds. So that means that we can use it for long. It will take forever. Subscription as with system account, system service. And on Windows, you can run only one script per time. Whatever needs interaction is not supported. You won't have any window pop up to you in order to click or do whatever else. And of course, that's the worst case for me. In that it's that you can't cancel a running script. If it runs, it runs. If it got stuck, it gets stuck, and it will time out after 90 minutes. Okay. And of course, in order to have a return, let's go back one. Sorry. You need to have outbound connectivity from the VM in order to have the results of the scripts. What do you need to know about serial console that we will also see together? Serial console has some prerequisites in order to run. The first one is that, okay, right now, I think nobody runs classic deployments. For those that you don't know what a classic deployment is when the Azure started, it started with classic deployments, and after updating and upgrading the whole platform, this changed. So you can have some old classic virtual machines that right now are not supported. Of course, you have the account that uses the serial console should be part of the boot diagnostics storage account. And your virtual machine should have a user that uses password. So any other chance in order to connect, it's not possible. And that's the last one, something that it's been enabled by default in all servers, is that the boot diagnostic should be enabled. If it's not, you can go and enable the EMS, Emergency Management System, that's also enabled in all Windows servers. This is something that it comes from Windows Server 2003. It's nothing new. It was there in case that someone couldn't connect to a Windows server. You could use the serial port in order to connect to it and gain a terminal console in order to do what we are able to do right now in Azure with serial console. This gives us a special administrative console. That's what serial console is all about. But clients are not supported. This is another issue that I faced, and I had, for example, I had a Windows 10 machine that I had to fix in order to make it run again because I had issues connecting and generally many things that and I didn't want it to redeploy and do anything like that. So we'll also show you ways that you can connect on Windows client machines and where you can troubleshoot from there. As Microsoft says, as you can see, it's not supported. So you have to know that. So it's time right now to go and start the whole thing. Right now, I have a Windows 2019 server here, and I will go to support the troubleshooting, as you can see, and you can have the redeploy that we discussed, and I will choose Serial Console. Serial Console will start, and I will showcase some of the commands that you can have. For example, by typing the question mark, you can have some of the commands. It's not command prompt. It works a bit differently, but by typing cmd, you open a command prompt channel, as it says here. Create a command prompt channel. So right now, I created a command prompt. By typing ch, I can check what channels are up. So one is the console at 0, and right now we have number 1 in order to connect to the CMD. Imagine right now that we don't have access, not via RDP, neither from SSH. So I'm trying to connect to my machine in order to make it work, or find or to restart it, or do whatever. You can do it also from here, because as you can see, if it's just a simple start, you can restart the machine or shut down the machine with these commands. But we will go inside and check more. So if we type, say it's the channel, and that we decide that our channel is 1, it will ask us for a username. I'm putting mine. I have a nickname called Blackman. I have a domain, but I don't need it to put it right now, and my password. So right now I am connected. Okay, if I do an IP config, I can see that I have this one, this IP. Okay, and let's say that I'm pinging myself, this machine, like that. -A is the switch that will bring me the host name and the domain. So right now I'm pinging Windows Server 2019. That's my machine that I connected to. If we go to the client machine and put the serial console, I will get a message of error that I can't connect, even if it tries. So in that case, what we do? What can we do? There are many ways in order to fix errors that might occur. The most common ones is, for example, you need to run a check disk. Okay, a check disk just to fix your disk drive because it has some errors. Don't think that because it is a virtual machine, errors in the partition can happen. Of course, they can happen, and they can need it to be fixed if that's the case. Or we can use, for example, a command like take own. That means take ownership. In order, if you need to take ownership on a folder directory generally, in order to make the whole thing work. The most common thing that we use at my office, of course, is sysinternals. I don't know how many of you know sysinternals or Mark Arsenovich. If you don't, you need to Google a bit or Bing a bit. And sysinternals is a list of tools that can be very, very helpful. And in my case, we use a lot PSExec in order to connect remotely to other machines. For example, if I do PSExec maybe cmd, this, if I typed it correctly, and I think it's, let's see, okay. This machine is my, as you can see here, my client. So if I do IP config right now, you can see from 5 we are 4. Okay, So, and if I do the same thing, to the same switch, I will get the response from the Windows client machine. So right now, I manage to gain access via the console to both the Windows Server machine and the Windows client machine via console. What does via console means? That means that you can access either virtual machine, for example, if you're using your mobile phone or a tablet, you don't need to have any remote desktop application, or you don't need to find something or to do SSH to the machine. I hope this is clear and you can understand this. Imagine what power that gives to someone, especially to administration or other people that work in Azure, when they can do stuff from their mobile phone. It's very easy. So troubleshooting, it's easy. And for me, for example, because I'm using very often Linux machines, in many cases, I don't have any RDP client, and okay, you can tell me that I can do SSH, but in order to connect via RDP or SSH, you have to know that in most cases in Azure, these ports are closed. For example, Bastion is something different. We will not be discussing for this today. So RDP or SSH. Okay. Right now, in order to access my virtual machine, I need to request access for this port. I have enabled the just-in-time feature. That means that I request access when I want to connect to the virtual machine. I get the access, and afterwards, if I don't use it, the access is removed from everybody to connect to that machine. So by using the serial console, you're being connected to your machines securely, and you don't need to request any access to them, especially when we are talking about commands, command line requests. Okay. In my case, I have something else also in order to that I use in order to connect to client request. For example, this is the client that I told you it can't connect. There is no console for it. So what other solutions there are besides PSExec that I already showed you? For me, PSExec is the best solution in such cases. But in my case, you know, after being involved with hacking, pen testing, security stuff in general, the most common solution in such occasions, in order to connect to something like that, I will exit that system. So I'm back to system terminal. I'm showing two. You can see I have a config. I am back to Windows Server 2019. Okay. The other thing that I do in my systems, because it's something that comes from that pen test stuff, it's old school. It's by using Netcat. Okay, I have Netcat installed on this server, and I also have Netcat installed on my my client machine. I will show you right now what do I do in order to open a line and via Netcat. So I know that I have put my the Netcat copy on this disk. Okay, and I want to put it like that in order to. And I will tell you what I'm doing right now. You can see Netcat uses I asking to listen to port 4444 and to execute the cmd.exec command. You know, in that case, when you do that, everybody is a common hacking technique. As I told you, old school. Most antivirus things find Netcat and block it. So I will run this. I won't have any input because this is listening, but I will go back to my machine and I will say to Netcat, in that case, to 10, how you connect. Oh, okay, at port 4444. Good, and we are here. Config. So this is back and forth. I connected once again to the client machine by using the netcat command. The netcat, it also exists in PowerShell and called PowerCat. I can show it to you, but I don't think it's kind of the same command. But the good thing that I can showcase here is that you can also, from a common command line, go to something higher, and you get right now PowerShell. Okay, so if, for example, you will see that I am right now. I have the power of the PowerShell, and by using PowerShell, I can do many stuff, many things. I can also download modules here. If I have set up my machine in that way, or I can also do stuff in order to avoid, to block or allow things to happen on my virtual machine. So this is one way to check on how to troubleshoot your connectivities, your machines, and how to connect from one machine to another without going anywhere else besides your browser within your own account, your own subscription. I guess that this is pretty nice because you can do many things, create users. You know, after that, the abilities are endless because there are so many commands that you can do. As I told you, check disk is something that you can do. Take ownership is something else. The thing that I know that it doesn't run from this is, for example, if we have something with our disk, for example, the command of sfc is something that cannot start that repair service. So you have to keep in mind that most of the commands run, but not all of them. Okay, I think that's clear. And as I told you, this is something that I run from here. I can't cancel it right now, but when I will exit, and I will exit both. Okay, what did I do there in order for you to understand this? I was in a PowerShell inside the client. I exited the PowerShell mode. So then I was on set drive of the client of my Windows 10. Then I exited that one and I was out of the netcat connection and I'm back to my Windows 2019 server. Okay, and that can be confirmed just by checking the IP. The IP of the server is 5, while the client is at 4. That's one. let's go to the part that makes more sense and it's more dramatic. It's the things that you might like a bit more. Okay, so we are now to the Kali Linux machine, and Kali Linux, when you're using the CL console, gives power. And when I say power, I really mean power, because in that case, Windows 10 and Windows clients might not work, but Linux machines work like a charm. What does that mean? You know, everybody that knows from Linux knows that they have so many commands. It's command line based mainly, and in that case we can do many things from a Linux machine. Okay, I will start by showcasing, for example, by using wbscan UoL, and I will try to give a look at my site, blacktrack.gr. It's my blog that I try to update every now and then, but I don't manage it very often. I will try to do a better job, but either way, that's not the case. This is my blog is on WordPress, and wp-scan, it's a WordPress scanning tool that can show you vulnerabilities and also brute force your way in, can find out passwords and stuff from users. So as you can see right now, CL console gives us power, because what you're seeing right now, I can do it from my mobile phone just by connecting to my Azure virtual machine and just click on CL console. It's as simple as that. And as you can see, I have things like, okay, this feature is not on the latest update. It's something that I can exploit. I can check stuff from here and I can exploit. And the thing is that I don't need anything else in order to use it. I need just the browser. Okay, because the browser is what gives us power and flexibility. The other thing that I can show to you is, for example, go to my Windows 19 machine, because I use my Kali machines in order to do pen tests within the Azure, either on the same resource group or outside the perimeter. So in that case, for example, if I use nmap, and I put nmap to check the address of my Windows 10 machine, right now it says that 443 is closed. Okay, but for example, if I come here, I open the request to open the RDP port. Let's check what it's going to happen. Let's do the same. I guess that we will have one more port showing up somewhere there. And as you can see, here is the request that we did. Okay, this is very cool, very nice. You know, it's cool. I think the word cool, it's what describes it best. It's very cool to use it like that. You can do your tests on your virtual machines, and I just checked it like that. I opened the port, and I have things that I get responses. And not only that, the thing that I was checking on my previous employer, for example, I had a thing by using techniques. Set toolkit is one of them. Wait, because we need more access, more privileges, set toolkit. And right now I'm here and I'm starting to create phasing stuff in order to give it to everyone that I want to test. I used to test like this my previous colleagues as part of the IT in order to check if they will click on phishing emails and stuff like that. I also have other applications and other programs that do that work, but I told you it's something that can be done also, as I told you, via by the use of by using my mobile phone or tablet. So I can do it from the beach, let's say. So one thing that I used to do is to create a QR code as an attack vector. I was giving a URL that was malicious in order to use it because they were testing some QR codes at work 2 years back. So let's say right now I will put like facebook.com. And right here, the QR code is being generated here. That in that case, I can go and fetch this file and then send it to whomever I want to. So what I want for you to understand is that there are many ways in order to use it. One of the things that I liked a lot was the use of another program that used to audit Linux systems. And in my current position at BNP Paribas Fortis, we have a couple of thousands of servers, both Windows servers, even though I'm in Windows systems, Windows Server architect, security architect. We have also many Linux servers, and there are many companies that have plenty of Linux virtual machines on their Azure Cloud services. So in that case, I will showcase this to you. The program is called Linus, and I will tell it to audit system. Right now, I'm telling to audit itself. So right now, I'm auditing my own Kali Linux, and this is a good example because at some point in a couple of months ago, we had penetration testing within BNP Paribas Fortis, and we had some findings on some servers. So the question was, are they valid or not? So in that case, we had to run for the Linux machines program like Linus in order to give extra information about this. But the whole thing is that when I discussed the whole situation that this can be done by using the shell console in some occasions when we're talking about Microsoft Azure environments, it sounded a bit weird, but for me, showcasing that I can do it from everywhere, I just need connection to the internet, nothing else. As long as I can connect to my to the Azure portal, I can do everything like this. Okay, I think that's clear. And as you can see, we also have color, and we have many findings, or you can see, unsafe stuff. So you also can do pen tests. You can do security audits. You can do many things, and all this, besides the troubleshooting that we discussed in the beginning, all this inside your browser. Back in the day, 15, 20 years ago, when you were talking, and even now, I don't know if there's any other way that you can run such commands and to be also so offensive by doing pen tests within the browser. I don't need to have a Kali Linux installed, even I do, but I can use it from whatever PC, from your PC, from your cousin's PC, from your mother's PC. I just need to have connectivity to the internet in order to do my tests, and also to be, I can be a black hat and be, malicious and do stuff that people might don't want to. I don't know how you find it till now. I will also showcase you. I hope this will finish soon. The ability also to use the most known tool for hacking, that's Metasploit. In that case, you might cancel this because it takes some time. I don't think that's long to go, but either way, I interrupted. So let's check, for example, those that don't know these tools. Metasploit is the most well-known tool in hacking because it has many exploits, many payloads, many things that somebody needs in order to do either testing or an attack. Okay, and from by using Metasploit, we also check in our premises many of the systems to check if they can be attacked for the vulnerabilities that are commonly known. And when you think that you can have the ability to attack someone by having this on your mobile phone within the browser, it's absurd. Imagine that you can go wherever you want and do that. Okay, and I'm also checking the time. You can have the help right here and check everything. But for example, if we do let's check Adobe. No, it's Adobe and not Abod. You have, for example, these ones. And VM2. Let's check this one. No. Something didn't load well at this time. I guess it's okay. I don't know what's going on. It used to work yesterday because I checked everything, but I will try once again. Or I can choose something else. All this that you are seeing right now are exploits, are well-known vulnerabilities that are inside Metasploit. Okay. The other thing that I use is if this doesn't go well. Yeah. Let's check, for example. Okay. We got inside the payload. Right now, we're ready to set up the payload for this vulnerability. That's Java. And in order to know more about this, you can do so info, and you know what this is all about. The description, okay, when it was found back in 2015, more details, okay, and references. You can find also references, and all this you can do it from within the console. So by doing that, I can also do check the options. Right now, these are the options set up for this payload, and from that, I can set the host that I want to attack, the ports that I want to attack, everything that I want to do, and what system I want to attack in order to check what I want to do to be malicious or whatever. Generally, this is the whole presentation of Share Console, as I showed to you, from Windows systems that can be used as a troubleshoot tool, and not only. You can also do more and more administrative things if you know how to work with commands. Commands are pretty nice, and also if you are running a Linux machine, a Linux virtual machine, which is also very cheap to use it on Azure, you can have tools like that, like this, and be also in the offensive side or pen testing side, or say whatever you like. So that's it for me. I don't know if there are any questions. So
Sir, there are some questions. Kindly check the chat box.
I will check it because I have my other system next to me. Let's check. Should I use PyCon? You can do it if you like to. And the second question is, how do I enable Share Console in Linux? If you have a Linux virtual machine, you have to do nothing because everything is enabled. If you need to enable something, it's just to enable the EMS that I told you about. That, let me remember where this is. Something on the features, on the options. In order to troubleshoot. I don't remember where exactly it is. Let me check. Give me 1 minute. But either way, I can not to stall, but all the Kali Linux, or not Kali Linux, all the Linux distributions that I have used, either it's Ubuntu, Debian, or whatever, as a virtual machine, all worked Serial Console without doing a thing. EMS was enabled. That's the only thing that is needed. And in the Linux case, this is not part of it, so it's enabled by default. So this makes it even more easy for you to use. It's simple as that. You can contact me if you like. At my page is at blacktrack.gr or at on Facebook as well, as I have my here. On LinkedIn as George Blackman, George Kabalakis, you can find me. On Facebook, on Blacktracks, my page. Thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the presentation and something different from all the other presentations. And I hope that you liked it, and you, of course, I hope that you also use it.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you as well.
I would like to take a moment and thank all of our guest speakers for taking out their precious and valuable time to enlighten us all with the knowledge, information, and skills. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and inshallah hoping to see such enthusiasm tomorrow as well. I, Aiza Anwar, on behalf of MLSA, wish you all a good night. Allah Hafiz and take care.
The opportunity for us as developers to have broad, deep impact on all parts of society and all parts of the economy has never been greater. AI is everywhere. A new world that is going to be made up of an intelligent cloud and an intelligent edge. It's about celebrating what you can do with that technology to have broad impact. It's about empowering every developer.